Welcome back to HPP, the podcast that covers college basketball and the NBA draft inside and out. I am Rich Harrison. Thank you for joining us again today. I am joined by Christian Kramer, no Doc Llewellyn, Drew Barton, Cameron Reel, and Jake is not with us because he's in Mexico. We've had various reports about his status in Mexico, but we won't go into that. And Doc, I'm not sure he's joining us or not. We've had to change the start times of the show several times, so people have kind of gotten lost in the shuffle. So, gentlemen, how are you all doing?
Doing good. It's been a busy couple of weeks here. The college I work at officially is going NCAA to Division II, so we've been kind of, going through that whole process, particularly with hoops, getting everything right, getting all the regulations figured out. And it's been a busy couple of weeks, but college starts in a month, I think. So
yeah,
we're right around the corner.
Some schools less, some schools in 2-3 weeks. When will it be official? How long does it take to get you there? And then you have to actually wait a couple more years to actually compete.
It's a 3-year reclassification process. So year one, the one we're going into, we're basically still operating in the NAIA, but we've been emphasized that we start, implementing NCAA regulations since they're so different, just so we're aware of it.
Right.
And then there's a 2-year transition period where after this season, we'll then be competing in NCAA for a 2-year probationary or like a probation where if we violate anything, I think the first year of that, it's a little bit laxer where barring a crazy, violation, it's more like a slap on the wrist. Hey, you're not allowed to do that. And then that third year is okay. It's, the training wheels are off. You got to operate. And it's a huge, people don't realize that NAI is the wild, wild west compared to, say, NCAA. There's basically open recruitment. You can interact with people as freely as you want. You can give money. There's obviously rules, but it's much more open. Whereas, NCAA have live periods. You can't talk to guys until they're, a certain amount of time removed from. It's crazy. I haven't been at the Stanford football. It's different than basketball, but it is far more regulated. So that's going to probably be the hardest part.
Okay. Anyone else got any news to report? All right, good. Anyone heard from Jake? All right, so without Jake, we're going to try to do the college notebook, and it's going to be short because there's not a lot of college news, and we don't have Jake to give us all kinds of interesting insight. But first of all, as Jake predicted for the last few weeks, Javon Quinterly finally made up his mind, and he is transferring to Memphis. So item number one. Next is freshman forward Marcus Adams, a top 50 recruit, is decommitting from Kansas. Adams was a 4-star just coming in, and he decided he's leaving the program before his career even starts at Kansas. And that is on top of Chris Johnson did the same thing and went to Texas. So now they've lost 2 4-star guys in the same year, but Kansas should still be pretty loaded anyway. An interesting story, and maybe Cam has some comments here because it deals with his alma mater, Tennessee. Chris Leadham, Harvard transfer, had committed to Tennessee and was apparently practicing there and so forth and so on, but he put his name in the portal last week, and now it was announced today that he's headed for St. John's. Very quickly was snatched up. So in the process, it rung a bell for me because we had been trying to figure out what's going on with Josiah Jordan-James. The last time I brought him up, when he decided not to turn pro, I contacted Tennessee, and they told me, well, he's not coming back here because we have no scholarships. But we didn't see his name go into the portal. We didn't see any news about him transferring. And we certainly didn't see him sign with a European team or whatever. So I had no idea what Josiah Jordan-James was going on. But as soon as I saw Leadham go into the portal, I contacted Tennessee. I was like, does this mean Josiah Jordan-James could come back? And they're like, he's already back. I don't know. Like, you told me before you had no scholarship, so I'm not sure how that all worked out. But Josiah Jordan-James will be back at Tennessee, and Chris Leadham is going to St. John's. So, any comments so far, gentlemen?
Not for me.
All right, we'll keep on rolling then. Villanova got some bad news this week. Trey Patterson, former top 60 recruit, suffered his third serious injury, or maybe fourth serious injury. This time he's got a torn labrum in his right shoulder, and he's going to be out indefinitely. He's had surgery on both of his hips. That was this past May. I think previously last year he had a sports hernia. Patterson at first wasn't getting a lot of playing time because that's Villanova doesn't play young guys. Now I believe he's going into a senior season or junior season. I'm not sure.
I think junior, but I could be wrong. He's definitely an upperclassman now, though.
Right. And he did reclassify and join Villanova. His freshman year, he joined them like around Christmas time. So I'm not even sure that counted as a year. But anyway, so not great news for Villanova, who had a great recruiting year in the portal. So yeah. All right. So with Kentucky, we talked about Aaron Bradshaw, their 5-star freshman. He's like an overall top 5 recruit coming into Kentucky, and he had suffered a broken foot, but there was a little confusion about when the foot was fractured. Apparently now I've gotten some clarification. It happened in June. He needed surgery, but he's supposed to be ready for the regular season. However, the incumbent center, the guy who was one of the backups for Oscar Tshiebwe, Uganya Onyenso, is now sidelined indefinitely with apparently a severe ankle sprain. So the words Calipari used was he's going to be out for a while. So I would assume 6 to 8 weeks, still should be ready for the regular season. And I really like Onyenso. And lastly, Florida State's Chandler Jackson. He's a 6'5" guard, former 4-star, who didn't play much last year as a freshman. He's been suspended indefinitely for undisclosed reasons. So Florida State in general has not had two years in a row. They've had a lot of players defect and so forth and so on. So Florida State may be looking at another mediocre season this year. We shall see. All right. So that's, unless you guys got other comments, that's the end of the College Notebook. All right. Quickest college notebook in the history of Hoops Prospects podcast.
It'll only get longer and longer.
All right, so we also have a short NBA chat before we get into our main topic today, which is the NBA Summer League. But got a couple items I wanted to discuss with you guys. I wanted to ask you what you guys thought of Cam Payne being traded to San Antonio for basically nothing, so they could sign Bol Bol. Did they ever look at their own depth chart when they make these moves? Have you seen what Phoenix has at guard?
I really don't like this trade for that specific reason. The idea of Bol Bol is great. Like, on paper, the idea of Bol Bol is a Chet Holmgren, Victor Wembanyama, 7-foot kind of freak who can play on the perimeter and defend the rim. But like, he has not shown that is his. He hasn't shown that he can get to that level yet. And they've already announced Bradley Beal is going to be their starting point guard. Going to be very interesting to see how that goes. And on their depth chart, according to ESPN, their backup point guard, as it stands, is Saban Lee.
It's a kid they got from the. Sorry to interrupt, but Saban Lee just signed a 2-way. The guy they're planning on, from what I understand, is Jordan Gordon, who
Jordan Goodwin,
Jordan Goodwin, which was a throw-in. Right. He used to play for St. Louis. Yeah. The year he came out into the draft, he was, I don't know, he was in our top 200, but he certainly wasn't in our top 100.
Well, I don't know if top 200 is.
He hasn't played much for Washington. So this is crazy. Jordan Goodwin.
Yeah, I don't like this trade.
Yeah. I mean, their guards right now are Booker and Beal, Eric Gordon, who can play some point, but he's not really a point guard, Damian Lee, and Jordan Goodwin. They're their 5 guards.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, Booker is going to be their full-time point guard. Yeah. I mean, it was basically already the case in the playoffs. He was running a huge number of pick and rolls.
When Chris Paul went down, especially.
Yeah, especially once Chris Paul went down. And honestly, like, the way he played in the playoffs, I don't mind that. If anything, I think his playmaking is better than anybody else they could bring in on a two-way deal or a vet min at this point. Definitely better than Cam Payne's playmaking ability, because that guy loves to jack up shots. Personally, I like the Bol Bol signing because they really do need a little bit of DeAndre Ayton insurance, just in case, his inner demons come back to him and he decides not to.
Then why bother to sign Drew Eubanks? Why bother to sign Chimezie Metu? Why did they bring back the guy who actually outplayed Ayton in the playoffs? The Australian,
Jock Landale.
Yeah. I mean, that's the guy they should have brought back.
Yeah, I mean, definitely you can debate that. I don't know. It's difficult with Bol Bol too, because even though he physically should be a center, I don't know if he really is. Like, you can really play him as an alternative power forward.
Offensively.
The question is defensively, if you can make that work for any period of time.
Right.
That's the question mark. But I think when it comes down to it, they wanted to clear the cap from Payne's contract.
I mean, I think signing Bol Bol is just cover. No team wants it to feel like, oh, we just got rid of this guy to save $26.5 million, which is how much they saved. So they frame it as well, we got Bol Bol. Even though that doesn't really, Cam Payne is probably is better than Bol Bol, is probably the more of a position of need. It kind of signals that they would be open to trading DeAndre Ayton more, but I really don't think that a minimum signing really pushes.
They should have done that around the draft time, and then they could have gotten backup pieces in a decent center in free agency. But
I think there's a lot of things I would do for $26.5 million. So.
I just wish teams would if you're gonna you're trying to win. Clearly this team is all in the next 2 years. So it's but you also are trying to worry about saving money. Try to win. I'm not a campaign guy, but you need help at this position.
It's not our money.
Eric Gordon is a 35-year-old with an injury history. Are you really hoping that he's gonna get through an entire season? Jordan Goodwin and Damian Lee
if something goes wrong with Beal or Booker.
Yeah. And I get the finances, but it's are you trying to win, or are you trying to? You can't have your cake and eat it too in this situation. You need as much talent as you can have on a team like this, and you just got rid of their best bench. They got rid of their best bench piece for someone who's going to be their third string center.
Well, even if he's their second string center, they just don't really. I mean, they already signed 2 centers. It just doesn't make any sense. Why did you sign him? If you wanted Bol Bol, why did you just sign him in the first place instead of Eubanks and Metu?
Yeah, I think
it's just the framing. It's just we got rid of him so we could sign this guy. This is how valuable we thought he was. But
for sure,
it's just whoever we thought. It's just we traded Cam Payne and then we picked up somebody that we thought whatever.
I think too, it's a little bit of dartboard type play where actually all 3 Bol Bol, Metu, and Eubanks are kind of unproven when it comes to actual playoff basketball. So it's kind of we need a backup big. Let's just throw a couple of darts at guys that aren't going to be too expensive and see who sticks.
Yeah,
right? They can move them. They can move them later on.
The definitive thing and paid Landale.
Yeah.
And then you knew you had a steady guy.
It's too easy, Rich. It's too easy. It makes
too much sense. All right. So the next thing that doesn't make sense in our NBA chat section is, and this happened a few weeks ago, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, but we never had a chance with the draft and the draft grades and all that good stuff. We had no chance to talk about this at all. So I'm going to throw it out there now. Jeff Van Gundy was fired by ESPN. And for my money, he is one of the few announcers, college or pro, that ESPN had that was actually enjoyable to listen to. Anybody else with me there? I know. Hugh loved Van Gundy, but we haven't really talked about Van Gundy much. Are you glad that he's gone? To me, it's a shocker.
To me, like, Van Gundy's kind of fun to listen to because he's so just out there sometimes.
Right.
Like some of his takes are just atrocious.
Yeah,
and I just have to think,
he says it with tongue in cheek.
Sometimes he's dead serious.
I don't know, man. That when he declared LeBron James as the legal guarding position, when he tried to take a charge, jumping midair, standing sideways, and doubled down on it after it was in slow-mo, I was like, okay, man, whoa, I don't know.
The fact that he even brought up legal guarding position in a telecast is nuts to begin with. Like, what, Jeff?
Wait a second. It's talked about Jay Billis. Every college game Jay Billis does, he goes on a rant about charge, and blocking calls.
Yeah, man. I like Van Gundy a lot. It's a little sad to see him go. I'm sure he'll get a job somewhere else. Somebody will pick him up.
But
he's the best free agent on the board at this point.
Maybe it's just me though, but with ESPN, they have so many annoying announcers that sometimes I loathe listening to the games. I mean, they just do. I mean, they pick these weirdos. I mean, remember when they had Dockich? This goes all the way back when they had Rush Limbaugh on their NFL pregame show. But I mean, Jay Billis is kind of like an egomaniac. How about Corey Alexander? Corey Alexander can't go 10 seconds without, no matter what the topic is, somehow making it about him. I mean, it's.
All I'm saying is the optimal timeline is if we get Bill Walton as a replacement.
Yeah, well, Bill Walton and who's his sidekick? I love Dave Pash. I love those two. Of course, I mean, Walton gets me. I end up not even thinking about the basketball game. That's my problem with him. But he cracks me up all the time. But most of ESPN's like JJ Redick. Are you kidding me? I'd rather watch paint dry.
Yeah, I mean, I think this basically just signals that they're not going to pick up the rights in 2025. I think they're just going to be, and everything in ESPN right now is a dumpster fire, and at Disney. And I don't think that NBA is going to be on ESPN the next go around, and that's basically what they're planning for. Just suck it dry for the next couple of years and not renew the rights and save money and talent.
TNT, I mean, most of their announcers are enjoyable, for NBA.
And it's fun. It's fun. They have a fun.
Well, I'm not just talking about the halftime crew. I'm talking about.
Well, yeah. But it's a theme. It's a tone where I feel like.
Yeah. And
ESPN knows they probably can't compete with TNT. I think Christian's right. I think they're probably
TNT, Apple.
Streaming. I mean, the NFL already has Amazon already has a clause in the NFL. Somebody's going to make a play for the NBA to try to somewhat counter that, if not Amazon itself.
These tech giants are like live sports is basically the last thing where you can get that big of an audience to be looking at something at the same time. And I think these advertising giants, it's just going to, all roll up into one big vertical conglomerate.
Yeah, I mean, talk about the death nail of cable TV. If sports bought up by streaming, it's kind of over for cable at that point. Yeah, in terms of TV revenue.
Well, it's not over. You still need the cable to get the signal, whether it's coming via satellite or via the internet. But yeah, they're going to have to change their mode, for sure. The problem I have with it is like with the NFL right now. I bought DirecTV when NFL package came out, and I've had it ever since. And now they're going to move it to YouTube TV. So now I have to change the whole entire way I watch TV.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to do that. My wife wants to, and I'm like, fuck that. I'm not going to chase the NFL around. I don't like it that much.
Yeah. Well, Bob Iger said that the CEO of Disney basically said this week that ESPN is going to streaming soon. It's not going to be on cable anymore. That's basically their plan with that property.
Okay, well, first of all, half the time the if you go to ESPN Watch, or where you can watch like ESPN3, or even if you have ESPN Plus, half the time it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you try to get their customer some support, oh, forget it. So yeah. And Hulu, if you want to find a show on Hulu, oh my God, you did just type in the title. Don't even bother to look. Like Netflix, you can always find what you want. But with Hulu, it's just like if you don't just go to search and type in the name of the program, let's say you don't know the name of the program, God bless you, because you're going to be there for a good hour trying to find how to find your show on Hulu. So, it's kind of funny because Disney always reminds me of like the Death Star these days, trying to buy up everything, trying to make a monopoly of sports for themselves. And the federal government stepped in and said, whoa, you can't do this. You can't buy up everything. And that's what they remind me of. But now it's kind of like Luke Skywalker, who's kind of like flown through all the crevices and just sent the torpedo down the one weak spot. It's about to explode.
I'm guessing Jeff Van Gundy is Yoda in this equation.
Well done, Cam. That was one of the best comebacks we've ever had. All right, so let's move on to the NBA Summer League recap. I guess I'll start with just asking each of you. We'll start with you, Christian. Just your general impressions. Let's not go into specific players, right? Because we're going to be doing that. We have all kinds of different categories that we picked out, but just what are your general thoughts about Summer League?
Just in general, I think that it's like, you kind of have a very small sample size with college basketball, and then of like actually good quality games to watch the players. So Summer League, while it's like kind of a joke to be watching it, is also kind of like one of your best windows if they do play like all 6 games into, I don't know what stock you would, if the draft was after Summer League, I don't know what percentage we would be placing it, but I think it would be around somewhere like 25-30%. I think we did learn a lot about the players, and I think that, there were a couple of surprises to the downside and to the upside, but I think a lot of those follow a lot of the patterns we see with what types of players do well in Summer League.
Yeah, a lot of guys, it was just an extension of what we've seen before.
Yeah,
which is good, meaning that we didn't overestimate them, we didn't underestimate them. This is what this guy did in college. So
right.
What about you, Drew? I'm going to ask you specifically about your Gonzaga boys around the league, and and your Warriors.
Yeah, so I think Summer League, first off, rookies, you can't really put too much stock into rookie Summer League performances because Victor played 2 games. Guys played 1 or 2 games. Scoot played half of a game. Thompson was a man played. So it's like rookies, I'm a little more like, you get what you get. I'm not too overly worried. I think where Summer League is really valuable is when you start seeing those 2nd and 3rd year guys, and we'll get into it. But I'll just use one of a kind of a darling on the show. You look at Tyrese and you're like, okay, yeah, it's legit because he went to this level and was that dude in 2 games. Keegan Murray, like you go, okay, it's legit. There's other guys look like a Jane, was it Boo Night, and you're like, okay, it's year 3 and this is still a problem at this level. So I think Summer League is more important for analyzing guys who've been around the league 2 or 3 years because at this point, the guys who are like the dudes, the dudes separate themselves from just another guy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's why I think Summer League is most valuable in evaluation. Rookies, it's so hard to tell. When I look at my guys in particular, I think it was a pretty strong showing from Zach's guys in general. We'll get into it, but I thought Chet was phenomenal. I think Andrew Nembhard showed he might be the best backup point guard in the league one day. Don't know if it'll be a true starter, but I think that
he also might be playing. He also might be playing against the best point guard in the league not too long.
Yeah. So I think Andrew Nembhard did really well. I think Julian Strawther had some lows, but I think he had some serious highs as well. My man crush Drew Timmy was unfortunately not allowed to play too much, but when he did get on the court, I think he did Drew Timmy things. And then, the Warriors will get into, I think Trace, that game, particularly his first game back was a little rough to watch.
He only got two games.
His first half really was tough to watch. There was he played some bad basketball, but I know he's probably hasn't really played at a high level in a minute. He was coming off an injury, but he did Trace Jackson Davis things, and we'll get into Pajemski. But yeah, I'm a big summer league guy. I think you have to obviously not put too much into it because except guys will play one game, the star rookies get shut down early because teams get a little bit worried about too much media attention or injury. But it is important to me where if you're supposed to be a guy, especially a high pick, and if you're still struggling in summer league, that tells me a lot. And if you're coming in and dominating summer league, that also tells me a lot. Like, okay, because at the end of the day, these are guys who are all professionals, whether it's in the G League or high level college players for the most part. So like there's still a good competition level here. It's not like these guys are playing, in the Drew League or a pickup game. Like these are guys who all have some form of high level, whether it's college or professional basketball under their belt.
And they're all fighting for jobs. They're all fighting.
Exactly. I'm a big summer league guy.
Well, not all fighting for jobs. I mean, some are actually a good portion of them are guaranteed money, but
they're fighting for
a lot of
contracts.
Right, but I'd say like 70% of them probably are not guaranteed any money right now. So
yeah.
Cam, what are your overall thoughts?
Man, the thing I love about Summer League is that you're getting to see all these rookies get their first NBA run. You get to see the guys that come out with a little bit of hesitancy. You get to see the guys that come out with the mindset to just kill everybody in front of them. But I love seeing that like kind of juxtaposed against guys that have been playing in Europe for like 15 years at this point, trying to make one last run at an NBA gig. I think it's great because it's that first kick of reality for these like 18-year-old kids. They come in, they're expecting to like go up against LeBron in a couple months, and then they get their ass kicked by like Isaiah Mobley, who's like a fringe, maybe spot starter.
He's a two-way guy.
Yeah, he's a two-way guy, right? He spent most of his year in the G League, and the rest of the year he spent like clapping for his brother. I love that aspect of it. Just like Drew, I love seeing the guys that come back year after year, the first couple of years into their career in the league, and they show that steady improvement. I love seeing that. I mean, this year was a really great example. You had some vets that came in and showed out. You had some guys that were coming back from injury, and it was their first run just to get a little bit of minutes underneath their belt before preseason comes around. I just love to see like the guys that are changing their game. Like you really see who's working on the craft. There's one guy in particular that we're going to get to in one of the next segments that I was shocked at how much better he's gotten in just 1 year. I love Summer League. It's too fun.
Right.
We gotta get the crew out there one of these years, man.
Yes. Oh,
gotta make it happen.
Most definitely. We actually talked about doing it this year, but then Hugh was leading that charge, and then he's fallen off the planet of late. So, one thought I had that I thought, and I don't remember it being this way, at least as much before, was a lot of the guys who signed the Exhibit 10s right away. Now, not every team did this. Well, first of all, let me preface this by saying, did you notice how Denver plucked their two-way guys off of completely different rosters? So their two-way guys were Jay Huff, who wasn't playing on I don't believe he was playing on their summer league team. Braxton Key, who I believe was playing on Sacramento's summer league team, and they kept their own Colin Gillespie. So that's their three two-ways. But so two of those guys weren't even on the summer league roster. They got the two-way contracts. But a lot of the guys who signed the Exhibit 10, and I'll just throw out some names, hardly played. And I'm thinking, why would you hardly play a guy who you basically all you've done so far is invite him to training camp? But I think what they're trying to do is avoid the Denver Nuggets scenario. I'll just throw out some names. The Heat signed Justin Powell, played for Washington State last year, played for Auburn before, and also played for another SEC team. I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, they signed him really, really quick and didn't play him a ton. They also didn't play Drew Peterson a ton, but they played him more. So I'm trying to think of some more. Gortman hardly played for the Bucks. Now, he was the highest rated player on our draft board that didn't get drafted beside Quavion Smith of the Sixers. Adam Flagler. Anybody see Adam Flagler out there for OKC? Okay, now he was another guy that we had in the 60s on our draft board, right there on the edge of being the second round pick. Didn't see him. And I think what's happening is the teams, they're going to pay their expenses, they're going to pay their apartments for now, and then they're going to bring him in for training camp, and then they're going to make up their mind whether they're going to give him 2 ways or not. And I don't think before they want to make that decision, they didn't want to let other teams get too good of a look at them and, sign them to a 2-way. So that's my theory on why that happened. But there were plenty of guys that were, in line for 2 ways who played a lot, Oh, by the way, Bagley he's supposedly on Exhibit 10 for the Sixers. I didn't see him at all. But that's not unusual for Bagley. So who knows? Our summer league categories, we haven't broken down, I think, are interesting categories. And the first one is called Veterans Ready to Take the Next Step, and it's led off by Keegan Murray. Now, Cam, you said, and Christian wrote right here in the script, you basically use the same words. You both say he was too good to be in summer league. So which one of you would like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really, everybody has been saying he's too good, too good for summer league, very common. But I'm very happy to see him in summer league. It's nice to see a professional NBA player playing basketball. That's fun. But I just wonder, it's like he played 30 minutes per game last year. I mean, you had a pretty big sample size. Did you really need to squeeze out these 5 games? And
he actually only played in 2, but right. But still, to me, that was like,
and then they took him out.
But for me, 2 was too many. But I guess I hear what you're saying. But on the other hand, I guess now you got to wonder: is he a starter for Sacramento?
I mean, he was playing up to 30 minutes last year, so I mean, he's he's borderline. He's borderline there already. Whether he's actually considered a starter versus playing 35 minutes a game, I think is up to interpretation. But he looked better than even you would think based on a player who was actually a rotation player in the league on a playoff team last year.
Yeah, he put up 40 some in one game, right?
Yeah. 29 and 40, 41, I think.
Oh my, that's big time.
I personally loved it. I think I get Jazz need to play the whole time, but it was the California Classic. It was in their home building where he played. The Warriors, one of the teams that he played, a team that, did beat him in the playoffs. And I just think that this shows that this dude is made of the right stuff. And that he's like, I'm in my hometown, or, my home team plays here. I'm going to suit up and I'm going to go dominate you. And then, I'll shut it down. But I think more so with guys like this, it's also a mental thing. Like, he was on a team where he was the 4th, 5th. I mean, there's a veteran team. He was playing with bona fide all-stars. Now he gets to go out there and be the dude and go be a focal point. And no one's expecting him to average 29 a game next year, but I'm a big fan of this. I think that, in an era where, we give guys so much crap for, load management and stuff, to see a guy who's a young dude, he's only going into his second year. Like, yeah, you need to be playing. You need to be out there. You still need to be putting in work. And compared to other guys who are struggling in their 3rd or 4th summer league appearance, for a guy to come out, be so dominant in front of his home crowd and go, yeah, I'm shutting it down. I was a big fan of it personally.
Okay. I just didn't think Keegan Murray had anything to prove to me. I thought he played well last year. So I'm thinking, but that's my only thing. Generally, I agree with you, but to me, summer league, when I think of summer league, it's a place to get better. And But I mean, I'm talking about substantially better to show that you're that much better. You know, I like.
Yeah, it's a showcase stage, right? Like you're not necessarily going there to get better, but you're going there to exhibit the work that you've been doing.
Right.
Right. The
Well,
parts
and
of your
also
game
I
that
think
you've changed.
I think the fact that he only played at the games at home, that had something to do with it. Okay.
Oh yeah, it definitely
Think
helps.
about it. Think about it if you're a Sacramento fan. If you're a Sacramento fan, our fourth or fifth guy just went out there and just dominated, you know, and our fourth or fifth best player, you know, just went out there and dominated. So that's got to be encouraging to a team that, you know, just added Chris Duarte, you know, I mean, this team's just looking better and better. I'm sorry, Kim,
I mean, I don't hate it. It's
I
fun.
don't hate it. I don't hate it.
Yeah, it's just funny. It's just funny to see like, oh, this is a real player like playing basketball, like playing in the summer league. That's funny.
Right.
Yeah.
Did I cut you off, Cam?
Oh no, I was just hyping you up, Rich.
Well, that's dope that you did that. All right, so moving on, we're going to talk about one of Drew's Gonzaga boys, and that's Chet Holmgren, who looked very good for Oklahoma City. Well, what do you guys have to say about Chet? Just start with you, Drew.
Yeah, I think if you look at both two-way play, he might have been the best two-way force in summer league. I just think that, again, you can make an argument he was really good in summer league last year. Obviously, he got hurt playing in program ball. And, like, he came in with a lot to prove, I think, just because there were questions. Obviously, people have been harping on the frame. And for him to get hurt before even seeing, you know, a minute of NBA action probably validated some of, you know, those quote-unquote haters. And I just thought that he came out and was an absolute force. He does what Chet does. He didn't even shoot the three ball very well, but if you look at his three-point shooting from last summer league, he clearly can shoot. It's there. He didn't, you know, just wasn't feeling it. And I think the thing that you have to love about Chet, and I know Cam wrote this, but the mindset that dude has is like completely dialed in, and it's why he's going to be successful. He's going to be a starting center in this league for 8-10 years if he stays healthy, because he's just wired to do that. Contest everything at the rim. He's chasing people down. He's thin, but he's attacking the rack. He plays like a 7-footer, even though he's thin. I thought he was great. I honestly am surprised, and maybe I don't know, I missed like a regulation or something, but I'm surprised he didn't make one of the all summer league teams. I mean, he averaged 3.5 blocks a game, was I think 15 points a game, couldn't hit a three to save his life, and still shot like almost 50% from the field. So yeah, I think Chet, this Thunder team is going to be terrifying in the next 3 to 4 years.
Okay. And I'm going to throw one more thought, and you guys, the rest of you could comment, but I threw this comment out to Drew off the air when I was scouting Wembanyama in the playoffs, in the French playoffs. And I said, you know, I really like Wembanyama, but I don't know if he's much better than Chet, if he's any better than Chet. What are your thoughts on that, Drew? Now that I thought you basically agreed with me at the time.
Yeah, totally.
So what do you think?
Look, again, we don't want to put way too much stock into summer league. Like, we've seen neither guy play in the NBA, and it's a very fair argument to say that Wembanyama probably played, if not did play against better competition in his 1 year before coming to the league, and Chet did, despite Chet playing at a high-level program. But I just think that, you know, and again, we'll get to Wembanyama, but when I watch Chet play, there's like a physicality and a kind of a nastiness that he plays with. I don't really see that with Wembanyama yet, and maybe that's because he's dealing with all this media hype and he's trying to navigate being in a foreign country and all that, and I think that's what closes the gap. I would still take Wembanyama. You know, I think just off a business decision, you take Wembanyama, and basketball-wise, I mean, he is a legitimate freak, but I really don't think the gap is that big, and I think Chet is probably going to be, I mean, I think Chet's going to be better this year in his role than Wembanyama. Statistically, Wembanyama might be better because he's playing for a worse Spurs team. But in terms of the value they add to the team, I think Chet's going to be more important to OKC this year than Wembanyama will be to the Spurs this year.
Right. Cam, what do you go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny you brought that up because I was actually thinking about something similar. Right? Like a moniker that kind of gets thrown onto Wembanyama is that he's like the Gen Z Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right? This massive person that can do so many different things with the basketball. So if you think that's true, then to me, Chet Holmgren's like the Gen Z Bill Walton, right? He's not going to do as many as the flashy things, where you think that about Kareem or not, right? He's not going to put up the huge scoring numbers, but all the little things that he does in the game really directly affect winning, right? He's so competitive on the rebound, like on the boards. He was bringing in 10 rebounds a game in summer league, and again, he's skinny as hell. In spite of his size.
Yeah, Walton wasn't really
3.5 blocks a game.
Walton really wasn't skinny, and he was
he was a big guy.
He was very physical. Kareem wasn't. Well, I don't want to dive into their games, but Kareem wasn't nearly as physical as Walton.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's a comparison though, in that like some of the things that we feel about Wembanyama, you could say about a younger Kareem, right? They're dominant in their skill, more so in their like force.
Yeah, I get it.
But,
I get where you're going.
Just a fun little comparison. But like, it's something like I was really happy to see Chet moving as well as he was, especially with coming off of a foot injury. But I forgot just how much of a hothead he is. Like I saw, in a good way, right? He's just so competitive, right? He's the guy that's he's gonna foul you and then for some reason get into a fight with you. Like he's that dude. Something that confirmed that for me was that like KG was at Summer League and actually went out of his way to interview Chet, which I mean, the stories about KG and young players are legendary. The fact that Kevin Garnett has respect for a young guy like him who's played this many 0 NBA minutes shows you just how much of a competitor Chet Holmgren is and just what kind of ceiling he really has as an NBA prospect.
Right. Christian, you have it written here in the script, the ideal summer league player.
I just watching Chet. No, and I don't want to take anything. Obviously he looks better than you could. This is like a confirming signal that he is going to be a very good player. But it just is when I look at summer league players, I do kind of grade them on a slight curve where if you have an overwhelming size advantage, I think that you do look a lot better in summer league. And I think if also you can score on your own without anybody,
there's not going to be
motion or movement, then you look a lot better in summer league.
There's not going to be a lot of team defense, at least not a lot of organized team defense.
Yeah.
A lot of guys went out there with like 0 practice. They just signed a contract and they had no time to prepare. So yeah, you're right. And
Chet Holmgren, he will be good. I believe that. And I'm not saying he's this player, but I was once burned by Okafor Summer League. I was very out, and then Jahlil Okafor came in on Summer League, and I was like, I'm back in. And then it was a false signal because he just was bigger, and I don't know. But Chet Holmgren, he has a lot more skills. Like he obviously could, even if, he's not the offensive center point, like he could just fit into an offense and a defense better. But I just wanted to use him as an example for when I look at other players. You will consistently see guys who dominate on the interior in college based on like a Kobe Coburn type of guy, or this year, Sanogo. Okay. They will do, for whatever reason, they are allowed to play like they did in college. But then when it really gets going, they can't sit on that block. They don't get fed on the block, and they sit on the bench day after day, night after night. And that's why I'm not overly impressed with Sanogo, because everything he did was at the basket. And I'm like, yeah, I saw him do that at UConn. Show me something new, so yeah. All right. So
Orlando Robinson did that in summer league,
right? But Orlando has a nice stroke, and
he does,
and he also has some passing skill. So yeah, a little different. Jabari Smith, Houston, I believe only played 2 games, but man, I was impressed offensively and defensively. That's why I had him the number one prospect last year. I knew his offensive game wasn't as varied as Banchero, but I thought defensively he was going to be able to bring it on both sides, and I definitely saw that in Summer League. How about you guys? Christian?
Yeah, I thought he looked a lot better. I think last year was kind of a disaster for being the safe wing pick. Anytime that somebody says safe wing, I get a little worried. I think of like Stanley Johnson, Justice Winslow. I mean, he's a different player, but Jabari Parker, like all these guys were like, no, he's a lock to be good at the very least. And then, they're out of the league. No, Justice Winslow's in the league, but Stanley Johnson is, traversing. But Jabari Smith looked very good, and he looks like he's going to be able to turn it around here. He came out shooting with, aggressively, which he knows is his swing skill, which I always like to see in Summer League. I just want to see a lot of shots because you can't really tell if they're improving from like a make perspective because it's such a small sample size. The one thing is I rewatched his highlights coming back into this, and I did see that basically every basket that he made was assisted, which is kind of his game. But I would like to see in Summer League, being able to take a couple, make a couple moves off the dribble, try to see.
Right. And that was one of the knocks we had on him, going into the draft. But again, I was one of those people who use that safe terminology.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to be a lock to be a very good shooter at 6'10", and I thought he was a lock to be a very versatile defender, both inside and outside. And so I was just worried about Banchero's defense. I was worried about his shot. So yeah.
And who's bucked that trend? Bridges. He was the safe pick, a safe wing pick. But then he basically used being a 3-and-D wing. He locked that down. He was able to contribute, and now he's added, consistently over time things to his game that make him even beyond, like his ceiling is beyond what people were thinking he was a low variance, like low floor, low ceiling, but his ceiling is probably better than a lot of players in the draft that were ahead of him, or where he actually is today is ahead of where a lot of people put ceilings.
Right. And I believe Jabari Smith is still 20 years old, I believe.
Yeah, no, I think he looks like he can turn it around, but just, setting the context.
The one area that I think he vastly improved in, though, even though he didn't have a lot of scoring looks off the bounce, his ball handling is light years ahead of where it was when he came into the league. And I thought that was really refreshing to see.
Yeah,
he wasn't worried to take guys off the dribble. He might not be turning it into a scoring look, but he was using the ball to really open up opportunities for himself and others.
And that was something he was very tentative with before. All right, so we're going to move on to Cam's guy, a guy we had rated as a lottery selection last year on the draft board, and that's Tari Eason. So, Cam, I know you were one of the people, or you were the person who convinced me to put Tari in lottery range last year. So, what do you think of him in Summer League?
Yeah, I mean, kind of unlike Jabari, I mean, we got a pretty big sample size of him at Summer League, and he really, I mean, outside of his 3-point shot, which, I mean, he was kind of jacking it at times, he improved in really every area of his game, right? The scoring came very easily. I believe he ended up being top 3 or 4 in Summer League overall scoring. It was about 19.8 a game, I think. To me, he really exhibits all the best parts of a guy like Patrick Williams, right? He's a 6'8" forward that has guard skills, right? He's truly a wing offensively, but defensively and on the boards, he's your power forward. Defensively, I think he took a step forward. He was close to 2-3 steals a game, I believe. And like real like home run steals, reading the game at a high level, and just beating the sloppy offense at every opportunity. I think the big step forward that he took, though, was his assists were up to 4 a game, and his turnovers stayed relatively even with where he was last season in the Summer League. I mean, that was a huge knock on him coming out of school. When the ball's in his hands, he really didn't have any kind of vision, and would really had tunnel vision to score and get to the basket. And he was up to 4 assists. He had some really strong looks. Maybe a part of that was he was getting to play with, a roster that maybe was a little bit over talented for summer league, right? He was playing with Jabari. Amin Thompson looked great. Obviously, they had Cam Whitmore, who was one of the biggest stories in summer league.
Summer League MVP, to be exact.
Yeah. But man, yeah. Oh, shit. He was actually at 23 a game. I'm sorry. I confused his points per game with Cam Whitmore, his teammate. I mean, it just came easily to him. There were some rough moments, but I appreciated that because it kind of showed he was pushing himself and he was playing with a really high level of energy. To me, him, Smith, they've got a pair of forwards that are just, I mean, it's hard for me to choose between them who I would want to build my team around. I think it's going to be doable to work both of them into a roster. But man, I mean, they're going to start to walk over each other a little bit if they're not careful, because their ceilings are really high.
And what about Whitmore? And then you got to throw Whitmore in there.
No, Whitmore, I think the shot was a little bit off. He was kind of jacking it a little bit too, but I think Whitmore, you can kind of slot into like young Jimmy Butler really was playing the 2 guard, right? I think athletically they're a pretty good comparison. And especially with the shooting that you're getting from a guy like Jabari, I think you can afford to lose a little bit of shooting with more of an aggressive downhill type of guard. I think some combination of the 3 of them, there might be a way to work it out. But man, Whitmore and Jalen Green, that's going to be a battle next year. Hoping that that Jalen Green is productive and efficient next year, because Whitmore is going to come for that job.
Right. All right. We'll come back to you in a sec, Cam, but I'm going to skip over to Drew and ask him about Dyson Daniels. What do you think about Dyson? I know he didn't shoot so well, but they're trying him a lot to be the lead guard in the offense. And yeah. I think that experiment was pretty successful.
Yeah, I mean, for a team, I know with the Pelicans, we've talked about them being a pretty awesome fit for Dame because they don't really have a true point guard. At least, they got CJ McCollum slotted there, and he's really a 2. And I remember Dyson Daniels being another one of those guys that we all kind of agreed was a safe pick. Might not have the ceiling of a Banchero or a Chet or Jabari, but this is a guy that you're going to draft, and he's going to be a startable player sooner rather than later for the next 8 to 10 years. And I think that's exactly what he showed. Offensively, the entire Pelicans team kind of went through some slumps. I mean, he shot pretty poorly. He's still over 40%, just barely for the 5 games. But man, defensively, this guy was at almost 2 steals, a block and a half. As your primary perimeter defender, pulled down 7 boards, 6.5 assists. He had a 2-to-1 assist ratio, I believe.
2.3.
Yeah, I mean, he looked ready to take on a bigger responsibility as a primary perimeter defender and ball handler. And the things I loved, and again, we're talking about second-year guys, he did, I only watched 1 full game start to finish of his, and that was their opening game against the Timberwolves. He penetrated and did absolutely whatever he wanted and got to wherever he wanted. The shot wasn't falling, but his getting into the paint, taking it out, moving the ball, physically just overpowering people. I mean, he's 6'7". I just thought Dyson played really good overall basketball. And the reality is you never drafted him for offense. If he gives you 12 points a game on solid efficiency and can get his 3-point shot up to the mid-30s, you're more than happy because you drafted him to guard the other team's best perimeter player, hand out 6 assists a game, and then also be a force on the glass while, coming away with 1 to 2 steals and a block. You drafted him to be a Swiss Army knife, and that's exactly what he showed. I think he looked really good. Offensively, it'll come along.
Yeah, I don't know if he's ever going to be, but what I'm really happy with is the 6.5 assists per game.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if he's ever going to be a strong scorer, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said,
as long as they can respect him,
Exactly, that's what I mean. He'll be a respectable offensive player just because of his size and his defensive ability. He's going to get 8 10 easy points. He's going to have an offensive rebound. He's going to go up and score. He's going to get a steal in a transition. He's going to hit a spot up shot here, and he's not going to be knocked down. And you're going to go, oh, okay, he's scoring 10, 11, 12 a game, and he's hitting 44% of it. Like, he's not a liability. Like, Jesus, I can't have you on the court, especially if you surround him with offensive talent. That's when I say it will come along. That's right. He won't cost you, I feel like, because he's a smart player. He's not going to jack shots just because he can jack shots.
Last year's Anthony Black.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comparison. Yeah.
Yep.
Fun fact: one of the players on our Menlo team is like best friends with him.
With Daniels or
yeah, they played in Australia together. Daniels.
Nice,
yeah.
nice. All right, so Usman Jang, another was he lottery? He was lottery, right? Last year, or if not, he was close, right?
He was the 11th pick.
Yeah, so he was lottery, and he's still really young, 20 years old, just turned 20, actually, only a couple months ago, and another OKC player that stood out in Summer League. Cam, what do you think?
Yeah, I mentioned kind of in our intro that there was one guy that completely shocked me at how much better he's gotten. This was the guy, right? Jang. We didn't actually see a whole lot of him in the regular season. He only played about 14 minutes. And last year, going into our draft process, I thought this guy was a absolute grade A bust potential type of pick. I mean, I just didn't see a whole lot out of him. I didn't see the ball handling. His shot wasn't there. And he proved that in Summer League last year. He was, 8 points a game, 20% from three, 34% from the field. Yeah, overall
56 from the line.
Rebounds. Yeah, it was a mess. He was a mess last year in Summer League. It looked like
he was a mess in Australia. He was a mess in Australia. What I saw in Australia, and I remember arguing this with Hugh last summer on one of our episodes, before the draft. And I was like, he looks great. In terms of creating a shot, being able to take really difficult shots. Problem is they don't go down. So
yeah, he could create them. Yeah. And man, this year, he put it together. He found something. Let's just look here. 14 points per game overall. He was up to 50% from the field.
Right.
Up to 35% from three.
Yep.
On 5 attempts per game, which is that's not a volume to sneeze at.
Right.
A lot of those he was creating himself.
Right.
He was stepping back into those. Yep. He was, like a spot up pump fake, one dribble left shot, right? 77% from the free throw line. Yep. His rebounding was up. His assists were at 4 per game, which is insane for me. For a guy that's 6'10" plus, honestly, handling the ball. I never thought that he was going to develop into anything, and he looked like one of the best developmental pieces in the league at Summer League to me. I was just, the feel for the game that he had was huge. He was fluid, handling the ball in isolation. He was scoring, right? The consistency is not quite there yet, but I mean, this guy's trajectory is insane. Just the sheer improvement is,
like I said, just turned 20. So, yeah, I think he was the youngest guy in the draft class last year. And so, man, Oklahoma City, boy, they got it going on. All right, 3 other guys I'm going to mention. One is Julian Champagnie, who just got actually a guaranteed contract from the Spurs. He was a player that we kind of liked last year to be a second-round pick. Didn't happen. Played on a 2-way with the Spurs. They rewarded him this year, and he played very, very good in the Summer League. His offensive game was a little stiff, but he, like a lot of the players we're mentioning, seems to has his handle. A little more, capable of creating for himself instead of just being a chucker, which he had kind of had that reputation. And Max Christie, the Lakers are looking for somebody to replace Malik Beasley and Lonnie Walker. And it looks like right now it's going to come down to either Cam Reddish, who didn't play in Summer League, or Max Christie. He played well. And Jared Springer, who we're going to be talking with our guest coming up, he too made a lot of strides. This is his third season. He's still only 20 years old, but this was his third Summer League. And if you go back, each year he's gotten a little better, but this year he finally got to, good numbers. So I'm going to wrap up this section of veterans ready to the next step by asking Christian, out of Champagny, Christie, and Springer, is there one particular player that impressed you more?
I would say Christie the most, in the fact that he can make the rotation. I think the Lakers know what they're doing in terms of they only have one true center besides Davis on their roster. And they're going to need a lot of guards. They're going to need to take a lot of shots. And tell me why this guy is not going to be playing over D'Angelo Russell in the playoffs. I mean, I think he has the tools to be a guy to sit in the corner and shoot and defend.
Oh, he's got more than that. I mean, he's got athleticism. Yeah, no doubt. And, basically, he did come in with, as a reputation as a 3-and-D guy. And actually, last year, I didn't realize he played in 41 games last year and shot 42% from deep. I did not realize.
He played about 12 minutes per game, but
right.
It'll be dramatic.
The kind of underrated thing with Christie is too, he grew over the course of the season.
Did he really?
Yeah.
He was.
If I'm not mistaken, he came in at 6'4", 6'3", and he's 6'6" now.
Oh no!
He talked about that.
I thought he was 6'5", 6'6" coming into the draft.
He talked about it pretty openly.
Well, I will
going into the summer.
All right, Cameron, I'm going to challenge you. Challenge Max Christie measured last year at 6'4" without shoes. So I don't know. I mean, we usually round that up because you never know whether they're giving the measurements with or without shoes. But so you're 6'4" without shoes. So most people probably listed him as 6'5". I don't know. I know at Michigan State he was listed like 6'5", 6'6", which is always funny because you can always count on all schools subtracting at least an inch off the measurement they give you. Do you do that, Drew? Do you guys just as an SID? Do you just take their measurements? Okay, all right, measured at 6'5". All right, 6'6".
No, I keep it legit. I actually make them look shorter so that it seems surprised. I thought he was center 6'9". I got this at like 6'5".
That's a good idea, actually. That's actually
no, when you watch the gym and they're like, "Wait a minute, what?"
That's a good idea. All right, so that wraps up our segment on veterans ready to make the next step. But before we jump into our other segments in Summer League, we're going to bring on our guest, Keith Pompey. For you folks that live in New Jersey or Philadelphia, you know that Keith is kind of Mr. Sixer around here, writes for the Philadelphia Inquirer, on TV for Comcast, and he's just hangs around the Sixers, and that's what he does. That's his job. Alrighty, our special guest this week is Keith Pompey, who covers the Sixers at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Keith, thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on the show, y'all.
Yeah, how long have you been at the Inquirer?
I've been at the Inquirer since 2004, but I've been covering the Sixers for I completed my 10th season this past year.
Okay.
I started with the process.
Okay. That's a nasty word.
It is,
nasty phrase.
It's got to be fun to cover, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, certainly interesting. All right, well, let's dive headfirst into it. Doc Llewellyn, who's on the show regularly, worked for the Wilmington News Journal. I think you guys met a couple times. He and I have been talking since the end of the season, when the Sixers had another playoff exit in the semifinals. And we both agree that we think that Joel Embiid's play style holds the team back in playoffs. And basically what I'm talking about is, the ball really sticks with him. A lot of times he tries to put it on the floor and he gets stripped. A lot of times if he does relinquish the ball, it's usually with the shot clock running, getting low, and it forcing, usually can often end up in a bad shot. I can remember the last game against the Celtics. It seemed like he gave the ball to Harden like every other play with like 5 seconds to go in the shot clock. Harden would drive immediately to the basket. Then he'd kick it out to the corner, and whoever's in the corner would miss the shot.
Yeah.
So, and we went over one episode, right after their exit, and I went over his synergy numbers for the playoffs, and they were just awful, So I want to ask you, why is no one bringing up that maybe Joel Embiid has to change the way he plays in order for this team to succeed in the playoffs?
That's a great question. I mean, I think maybe some of it is that, and you brought up some great stats, right? I mean, stats, like they say, the ball don't lie. The stats don't lie either. I think a lot of it, when people look at Joel in the playoffs, we're all thinking, oh man, okay, this year it was his knee, before that it was his face, and it was his hand, it was something like that. So, and when we look at it, we're not looking at his stats, and you're saying, you're right, like regular season they're here, and then in the playoffs they go down. But people are like more focused on, oh well, next year they'll get better because he'll be healthy. But I think the one thing that you did bring up, it is true. It's kind of like what the Sixers tend to do a lot of times is play regular season basketball in the postseason, especially with Joel. Whereas there are certain things where teams, defenses, they're not really showing, or they're not going all out in the regular season, 82 games.
Right.
So, where Joel can have the patience and he can find an open guy. But then what happens is in the playoffs, they're cutting off the passing lanes, they're blitzing guys, they're doubling them. And what we saw in Game 7 was, Joel was essentially playing a 7'1" or 7'2" two guard behind James Harden, and that's not going to help the spacing. It's not going to help them. So I feel like it's a combination of where the Sixers and Joel have to find a better way to adjust and play a certain way in the playoffs, and that hasn't happened.
Right. A lot of times we saw the Celtics bring Marcus Smart down, and some people thought that was crazy, but they kind of knew when Embiid gets the ball at the elbow, he's either going to take a fadeaway, which is not the most efficient shot in the NBA, or he's going to put the ball on the floor, which is not a good idea for a 7-footer matched up against a former defensive player of the year, because he's going to pick your pocket. And the Sixers just couldn't seem to adjust to that.
Yeah, and you're right. And especially a 7-footer who's like has a history of turning the ball over when he tries to put it on the floor, has a history of turning the ball over when he extends his arm to make passes against I don't want to call him a thief, but that's what he is, a basketball thief,
right.
and Marcus Smart. So you are correct. And it just seems like, sometimes what you got to do is you got to have somebody at least coming in there, getting Joel not in a lot of space meaning going out in the perimeter, but instead of having a guy like PJ Tucker out on the wing, use his girth to not get one of these guys off of Joel so he can have an easier shot. You know what I mean? Right. I just felt like, Joel, his statistics speak for themselves, but there was also a problem with the adjustments or the lack of adjustments being made.
Right. In the decision making, I mean, he's not Jokic. The ball does not stick. Okay.
Mhm.
And with Embiid, the ball sticks, be it regular season or postseason. And Joel's got to know, okay, Al Horford's guarding me. I can put it on the floor and score on him. Marcus Smart is guarding me. I can't put the ball on the floor and score him. Maybe I should pass, but it's not, he never makes those quick decisions. And yeah. So I'm going to move on to Doc's questions. Because like I said, he and I are in the same, we both agree on this. And his question for you was, can the Sixers actually win a championship with Embiid?
You know what? It's weird. I think they can, but I also think that you got to have the right person with them. Like, let's just say if Jimmy Butler was still here, right? A person who he has the utmost respect for, he has confidence in. If they had a shooter like JJ Redick with that group, and it could have been Seth Curry, right? I feel like if you have that type of combination, I think that you could. But it would also be one of those things where, since he has faith in them, he's going to allow them to do things. I think a lot of things that what we see Embiid do and does, and it comes across is very selfish. And yes, he isn't the Joker, right? Let's get that out there. Embiid, a lot of times he's looking for his shots. But if you notice, there are certain times where, like, if a teammate, like you said, he'll kick the ball out, and maybe he held on to the ball too much, too late. But if that guy misses that shot, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I got to do it all by myself.
Right.
And when in the statements that always come out, I just can't do it with me and James or two or three. We need more. So I feel like Joel has to play with someone who he has a lot of respect for, a la maybe a Dame Lillard, right? Or Jimmy Butler. And I think he will. I think he would. But right now, with like this current group or something like that, I don't see it. I don't see it because I don't think that there's somebody on this team that's with him. Maxey is evolving, but he's not that Jimmy Butler type of guy. I just don't feel like, I feel like he feels like he has to do too much with this team right now.
Right. All right.
Yeah. Rich, I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball and
Okay.
switch to one of our later questions.
All right.
Yeah, Keith, you brought up Dame Lillard and his possible fit with an Embiid core in Philly. And, a lot of like NBA media has been floating around this idea of a 3, even a 4-team trade that would actually land Dame in Philadelphia, but also sort of resolve the Harden issues. Of course, the issue is with any trade that's structured around Harden that's going to land with Lillard, obviously Maxey would have to be involved in some sort of deal like that, presumably going to a place like Portland. Along with draft compensation, what have you. But, in your mind, would bringing in a guy like Lillard, even if it's at the expense of moving on from Maxey and Harden, would that bring the Sixers closer to championship contention than the alternatives of perhaps, moving Harden for depth pieces? And really, too, like, what would bringing in a player like Lillard mean to the city? I mean, he would be pretty clearly the best point guard to play in Philadelphia since AI.
What are your thoughts? Sorry. I didn't mean cut you off.
No, you're good.
I do think that it would bring him closer to a championship than if Harden stayed and Maxey stayed. I think Maxey would have to be the casualty in that one, right? If it worked, if it should happen. And then also with role players, you can go out there and you can say, okay, I'm going to get Norman Powell. I'm going to get Terrence Ross. I'm going to get, let's say, Marcus Morris, right? Just throw him in there and we get a couple picks. But if you can't get like a third team involved, who's your point guard? You know what I mean? So that's the problem you have. When you look at Dame and you look at Dame right now is what Harden we thought Harden was going to be. He was Harden from a couple years ago without, he is a ball dominant player, but at the same time, he is not like dribble, 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 right? So I feel like the attention that that Dame Lillard would draw would free things up for Embiid. I also think that the star power and the way that Dame could the way that Dame you know can light it up would also basically, in my opinion, would enable Embiid to say, you know what, y'all, I already got MVP. I'm chasing a championship now. So this guy can get me to the playoffs. All I have to be is healthy, and next thing you know, I can win. So I do think that it will get them closer. Now, again, we also can't discount that, Milwaukee re-signed their players and they added depth. You look at the Boston Celtics, we're trying to see how that's going to work out. But those two teams upgraded. So when you add a Dame, it keeps them in the mix. Now, maybe they can go ahead and do it, but it's not like a slam dunk to say, okay, now all of a sudden the 76ers are the best team in the East. But I do believe over those other two alternatives, I would do it. And it would get closer. And the reason why I would do it is I love Maxey. Don't get me wrong, I love Maxey. But if you're saying to me, you're the 76ers, and you're saying Joel Embiid's window is getting ready to close, right? We really need to get this championship. Well, I think sometimes you got to put all your chips, in and try to get a championship. And you look at Dame right now in the prime of his career. You look at Embiid in the prime of their career. And I know you got a lot of money on the back end. But if you're saying that you got to win a championship, I think that's the best combination that you would have. And it might even be better than the one they had with Jimmy Butler,
Okay. So in your opinion, ultimately Harden really doesn't really have any say in the matter, though we've seen him act out when he doesn't get what he asked for, such as like when he came to Houston out of shape and came late. And so what do you ultimately, I know you don't know, but if you had to take a guess, are we going to see Harden in the Sixers uniform next year or not?
I don't think it's going to be the Ben Simmons situation. Like how Ben was just like, yo, I'm not coming. He's like, whatever, find me, this and that. I don't think it will be the circus. I think that it would be in the Sixers' best interest to get it done beforehand, before Harden shows up, before training camp starts,
right?
Because it's going to be a huge distraction, right? But I don't see James doing what he did in Brooklyn or doing what he did in Houston, because at this particular time, at that point, James was always going to get his money, no matter what happened. Like he was James Harden. Now it's like to a point where we're looking at him and you're saying to yourself, like, dude, you got a history of doing things like this, and you have an expiring contract. There's no one in their right mind that's going to invest in a lot of money in you and realizing you might get unhappy, and you're going to do the same thing that you did to Houston, Brooklyn, and then the Sixers. Nah, we're not going to pay you. So I think for his future earnings, he's going to, do what he has to say. Do what he has to do. But behind the scenes, he's going to be like, yo, get me out of here. But I do think he's going to show up because he wants to get another contract.
Right. Cam, I'm going to kick it back to you.
Yeah, if it comes down to it, I agree. Like, it's probably safer to move Harden before the season, right? You don't want the risk of him dogging it. But with that in mind, like, you're looking around the league, you're confident that Embiid is a strong enough piece to build a championship core around, but it's got to be the right guy with him, right? If you're going to go out there in the market, like, let's just imagine everybody's available. Who's that one star piece that you want to fit with Embiid to really make a contender? Who's going to be that perfect fit alongside Embiid?
The perfect fit alongside Embiid. If we're talking young, and I don't see this guy becoming available, but if we're going to talk young, I like Devin Booker. I mean, I do. And I know that's not the name that everybody talks about. I know people talk about Zach LaVine and then, they'll talk about other guys like Kyrie, but a guy who can, who steps up when need be, a guy who's believe it or not, in my opinion, a very underrated all NBA type. I think it would be Devin Booker, a young guy, a guy who has respect for it. Zach, I feel like, Zach has shown me a lot with playing with DeMar DeRozan and stuff like that. But I don't know if he can, if he's the type of guy that, and maybe not Devin either, but I don't know if Zach would be happy being second fiddle or doing things like that. Like, I think he wants to get his, you know what I mean? Whereas Devin, I just think that he can turn it on and be explosive. And then especially in the East, I don't see a lot of two guards out here that's going to be able to stop him, like in their division, right? So yeah, I like him. And I know he's a wild card. People don't talk about him, but that's the guy I like. But to be honest with you, the one guy that we talked about who right now, a guy who can close out a game, a guy who's a point guard, a guy who I know his defense isn't good, but you talked about him, Dame Lillard. He looks like he could be the best piece for him. You know what I mean? He could be the best piece. Now, I don't know if they want to have all that money tied up, but to me, he's the best fit, in my opinion, because not only that, is because he's a guy that I would feel like that. Joel is saying all the right stuff, the rhetoric. Like, what does he say? He'll say, I need help. I can't do it all by myself. And now, some people may say otherwise, like, Joel, you want to do it all by yourself. But he's saying that. So if Dame Lillard would come in, a guy like that who can score a lot and put up all the other things, and then that will help Joel out. But I just want to let's say this. These are the guys that I'm talking about, but I don't think the Sixers are going to get Dame Lillard. I just don't think it's going to happen. But if you just said pick a name, that would be the number one guy to me.
Heath, were you out at Summer League?
Unfortunately, I wasn't this season. Nah.
All right. But did you pay attention to it at all? Or maybe I should say, what's the word, around the organization in terms of who they were pleased with, in terms of, like, for example, let's start with Jaden Springer. He definitely had, the best Summer League we've seen him have, though there was still some problems. So what do you think about his progress?
I think they like it, and I like it. Like you said, he's still growing. The one thing that stood out to me was, it's funny. Like, you look at him and you say, okay, this is a third-year dude in Summer League. Of course he should be scoring the way he's scoring. Like, there are certain things that he should do better, right? But when you look at him, you say, wow, he just turned 20, right? He's 20 still. So that gives you like, oh, wow. Okay. Well, we see it. He still has some room to grow. But the guy that the star of the Summer League to me was Turk Smith. And, he's a guy that I look at it and I still like, in the games, I felt like he was a little bit rushed, hurried. He would make some mistakes that he wouldn't make through the first three quarters. Like, It just seemed like those last 4 minutes was like, he just unraveled a little bit. But then you also understand where they had him playing in one, something that he doesn't do. Guys are stepping up. They're doing, pressuring him more, doing a lot of other things. And he was making mistakes. But the thing is, in my opinion, he was the star of the Sixers Summer League team. he did a lot of good things for them. He was a star.
Right. Now, a lot of us expected Terquavion to be drafted. Did you hear any scuttlebutt about how
Yeah.
did the Sixers talk with him beforehand?
Well, it's funny, like, isn't it? Like, yeah. I mean, yeah, I believe they did. Well, you heard that they talked to all of them, right? Like in the interview process or whatever, this and that.
Right.
But the thing is that with him, it leads you to believe that the Sixers were elated because I've never seen teams announce as soon as the draft was over that we're going to sign these three guys.
Right.
So that, and the thing about it is, yeah, he's like, what do they call him? He's a poor man. What's the guy from he went to he's on the top of my tongue. He went to VCU from Delaware.
Bones Highland.
Bones
Yeah,
Highland.
he's a poor man's Bones Highland. He's a poor man's Bones Highland. So, yeah, I mean, I was shocked. I mean, again, I think it may have worked out better for him for not being drafted,
Right.
because some second round picks, you sign a two-way, but at least now you got a two-way with a team that you want to be on.
Right. I'm going to ask you about a guy who was recently cut by Portland, and Sixers picked him up for Summer League, and I thought he played really well. And that's forward Greg Brown out of Texas. So he's been in the league a couple of years, hasn't really, shown a lot, but I thought in Summer League he was impressive. You think the Sixers might sign him to a two-way? Oh, actually, they don't have room, do they?
Yeah, they don't have room.
So,
But he could be someone that they could sign to. They could give him an Exhibit 10 contract.
right.
They could also, and with that, and they could also sign him like to their preseason thing. You're allowed to hold up to 20 guys on there. But I think he could, work out. And then when we look at it, the thing is, the way he played, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some other teams who might have something for him. Whereas, like, you look at it and you say, is he going to make the team, the Sixers? And if I was him, I would go to a place where I think I get a better chance of making a regular roster, or at least a two-way. Yeah.
Right. Speaking of forwards, we got a few more questions about how the Sixers handled free agency. I'm going to kick it back to Cam.
Yeah, Keith. So obviously you've been covering the Sixers' decision to re-sign Paul Reed, matching the offer sheet from the Jazz, which basically contained, for our listeners, a poison pill that is going to cost the Sixers as much as $14 to $15 million, assuming that they make the playoffs next season. What in your mind was matching the deal for Paul Reed worth the salary cap issues that it could cause down the road? I mean, maybe even this season.
Yeah, that's a funny one. Like, I think they should have, signed Paul Reed, but I also sit back and I'm thinking, like, what took y'all so long to make him a legitimate? I mean, well, you didn't make him a legitimate offer. You were waiting to match what some other team did. And you're right. It seems like this cost them a lot more than what they could have received. I mean, what they could have got for, or what they could have paid them. So yeah, it's like weird. Like, it was funny because I was like, "There's no way they're going to match this. There's no way," And then you hear like that night they were still unsure, and then bam, they had to do it. And sometimes you wonder, it's like, okay, well, the fans were upset. Everybody was saying this and that. Maybe we do have to bring them back. But you're right. Paul Reed is about to get paid because, like you said, make the playoffs. It's like if they make it to the second round, which they're expected to make it to the second round, he's going to get $15.8 million guaranteed on that, on the back end. So, I mean, if I'm Paul Reed, I'm celebrating. I'm still celebrating.
Right. Do you want to follow that up with your?
Just kind of going off of that. I mean, the decision to re-sign him really reminded me of some of the in my mind, some of the past mistakes that the Sixers have made roster building. There's sort of like an obsession at throwing big money at front court players, even though they already have Embiid, right? You can go back to guys like Andre Drummond, but I mean, this year's roster is already looking pretty tall. I mean, you got Paul Reed, in spite of his cap hit. You got Mo Bamba, who has just signed. Montrezl Harrell brought back. They just signed Philip Petrusev, I believe, today or yesterday. And obviously, you got PJ Tucker in house. He's undersized, but he's also a forward, plays small ball center at times. And then, I mean, even Tobias Harris, like you could argue that he's best suited to play the four, even though, you know, his skill set, he can go out to the three, play on the wing. But what do you think the motivation is in signing all of these bigs year in and year out when they could be throwing money, you know, at more guards or more 3-and-D guys that would maybe better fit Embiid? Yeah, is all this depth hurting the Sixers, or is it actually maybe it's helping them out in some ways that you might not think about?
I mean, if you can trade Montrezl Harrell along with James Harden, you know, a guy like that, then it could be good. The Petrusev thing, I look at it like, you know, Petrusev, you know, he's a guy who was stashed overseas for 2 years. And, you know, executives have always told me, like, if a guy can get out of his overseas contract, like if he can get out of that thing, like basically he has control on whether like I get to try out for this team or not. And let's face it, that's what it is, a tryout. Like only 500,000 or something like that is guaranteed, right? So what that tells me is, son, you wanted to come over here. So we're going to give you a training camp deal, right? So if you basically make the team, then all of a sudden we're not keeping you with the varsity. You're going to be playing with the G League team. You're going to be, you know, with the blue coats, right? If you don't make the team, then all of a sudden we're only on a hook for $500,000. Now, I wish somebody said that to me. We're only on a hook for $500,000. But basically, that's what it is. The thing about Mo Bamba, that's kind of like low risk, high reward. You know, the knock on Mo Bamba is he's lazy. You know, he doesn't like basketball. That's what people say about him, and he'll admit it. People think I don't love basketball. But when you look at him, he's an elite shot blocker. He's athletic. He has a lot of length. And he's a good friend of Joel Embiid's too, right? And if there was a knock on the Sixers after they got rid of Andre Drummond, it was like you don't have any towering bigs. Now you did have Charles Bassey, who they let go, but outside of that, the other guys that they had, we're talking about Jordan, right? DeAndre Jordan. I mean, you know, we're talking about Dwayne Dedmon, like two guys who came in with a lot of hype, but they just were past their prime. So I look at this one as we got him on a minimum salary, and what we'll do is he'll be in the group, and if we need a big, we're going to look at him, and we're getting them for the minimum. The Lakers waived him instead of paying him $10 million. I think the Paul Reed thing, I think that came down to one of those things where, you know, he's their most reliable big that they have right now, backup big behind Embiid. But I also think that the outrage of the fans kind of played into it a little bit. I feel like the fans are looking at it like, hey, look at all the quality guys that y'all had and y'all let go. You know, you guys pointed out that they have overpaid for some guys, but for every guy that they overpaid, how many guys have we looked at and left the Sixers and we saw them on different rosters, going back to Jeremy Grant, who turned out to be something.
Well, how about going back to Drew Holiday?
Oh,
Hey, Andre Iguodala.
So that was one of those, and I also, you know, again, like think about it, like social media was a buzz, like y'all gonna let this guy go? You gonna let him go? So I feel that way. Now, the one thing that I will say about Montrezl Harrell is I was a little shocked by it, but he got because he got opted out, but ended up that was the best thing for him because now his pay has increased, and since it's a 1-year deal, it's better for the Sixers too because they're not on the hook for all of his salary because he got a veteran minimum 1 year, so the league pays like a portion of that salary. But the thing about it is his contract, the way it is, if they want to trade him tomorrow, they can. Like some guys, you have to wait, but him, he could be, inserted in any trade just to make the money work or anything like that. So
Right.
when they say don't pay attention to the roster now, they're not saying that specifically about him, but he is one of the guys like you can get a better idea on some of the things they can do.
Interesting. Got one last question for you, Keith, then we'll let you go. And basically, it's along the same lines. Sixers got one open roster spot by my count. Is there any chance that they bring in a shooter? It seems like this roster really could use a shooter. I'll throw out a few names out there. Got Kelly Oubre still out there. Terrence Davis played for Sacramento last year. And Joe Wieskamp, who was just cut by the Raptors. But I mean, they're just a few names that I thought of off the top of my head. Do you think the Sixers have room and can and will bring in one more shooter?
You know what? I think the problem with that is, the Sixers want to give that person like a minimum salary, so to speak.
Right.
And those three guys, I look at them saying, "Bruh, I'm trying to get paid." You know what I mean? Going elsewhere. I think that what we could see is, I don't think they're going to fill that roster spot, in my opinion, until after they know what's going to happen with James. Right. Because, let's say if you have an open roster spot, and remember they had an open roster spot in the beginning of last season too.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an open roster spot, whenever you make a trade, then you know what I mean? It's easier for you to bring another guy in that way without cutting someone. Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, Keith, I want to thank you again for joining us, and I'm hoping you'll come back during the preseason, and maybe you can let us know how the team's doing then, and maybe give us some preseason predictions.
All right, that'll work. And I thank y'all for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, I always appreciate it. And by the way, everyone, you can read Keith's articles at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and you can follow him on Twitter at Pompey, at Pompey on Sixers. That's ON, and both on Instagram and Twitter, same handle.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Keith. It was fun. So thank you, Keith, for joining the show. It's great to have some input on Sixers. So we'll move on to our other Summer League categories, with the first one being rookies ready to make an impact. And I guess we'll start off the list with Victor Wembanyama, who I think, I don't think he was the most impressive rookie. But I think he certainly showed enough to do what this category represents, and he will be ready to I think he will make an impact this season and be a solid starter. Christian, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that he, is definitely going to be able to, tail the two games. First one, he was getting booed, and second game, he showed that he is, in fact, kind of worth the pedigree. I think that, it's tough. He has the expectations of not only being the number one pick, but being like a lock number one pick. I kind of think of, and I don't know if you guys disagree, but since Greg Oden, who was another like lock number one pick that was kind of a bust, the top three pedigree number one picks are Ben Simmons, Zion, and who's the third one? Ben Simmons, Zion, and Anthony Davis. And I think all three of them have kind of not been like the best player in the league or even a top five player. I don't think Anthony Davis has, at least
for me, lived up to expectations. And footnote, I never liked Odin. I mean, I had nothing against him personally. I just didn't think he was that good of a player. So
the world will never know, I guess. I was not evaluating back then on account of being 9. Anthony Davis, I think that this past year, but he is just inconsistent. But I think it just goes to show that, like, I think you'll never have a 19-year-old, I think, again, where it's like everybody says he's a lock. He comes into the league, he just dominates like LeBron James just because the level of skill needed. And I just kind of think that first game showed that, like, he is going to have to work with an offense. He does have a lot more to learn just because the level of skill required in this game these days versus the past 20 years is, much, much higher. And I think that it's hard for any 19-year-old to be considered a lock to be a superstar coming out of the draft. That's kind of summed up my overall thoughts on
Drew and I talked about this privately, and my whole take on the situation, this was the same conversation we had where, is he really much better than Chet Holmgren? And, kind of thinking out loud, it kind of hit me. I do think we're going to see hype like this in the future because the league and whoever telecasts the league has a vested interest in hyping us all up. And they're going to be dishonest, and they're not really going to evaluate. And you just heard them go on and on, no matter what game you had on. They were talking about Wembayama, and it's hype generated to attract viewers, to get people to buy tickets and shirts and everything else. And it's horrible for the kid.
Yeah,
it really
basketball is unfortunately, I think, out of all the sports, is the most susceptible to just the hype culture, and just it's a sport that out of all the other ones is consumed for a lot of people through just highlights. I mean, there's people that literally thought Wembanyama was a 50% 3-point shooter because he was shooting these one-legged side step threes. This guy can shoot it. I'm like, if you look at the numbers, not really.
He was 31%, I believe.
Yeah, he can hit a three. It doesn't mean he should be shooting three. So I think that's the biggest issue. Rich and I talk about this a lot, but I mean, we literally had analysts who are supposed and MVP voters saying that if this guy has the same career of a Dirk Nowitzki or even a Hakeem Olajuwon, he's failed. And if you were to do an all-time NBA redraft, Hakeem Olajuwon is probably going in the top 10, just based on if you look at careers. So I mean, I agree that this is going to come up because there's going to be another kid who's going to be 7-3 plus. There's going to be another guard who's super explosive. I mean, this is what overtime elite banks on doing. So, I do agree that I think he's going to be solid when coming in. But there's people that he's going to come in, and I could totally see Victor averaging 18 points, 8 to 10 rebounds, to almost 2 blocks a game, pretty efficient. And people are going to be like, where's the 30-point, 20-rebound double-doubles I was promised? That's just the unfortunate situation. But, I mean, yeah, I think Taylor 2 games, and I think he had, 8 points in game 1, 27 in game 2, and I think the reality lies somewhere in the middle. That's just he's going to be a good player on a not very good team, and his numbers are going to come by the way of his size, skill, and just opportunity, because the highest guy on that pecking order is Keldon Johnson offensively, so he'll get his, but he's not going to be the child that was promised that we've been sold for the last year.
I also think the Luka factor comes in here because everyone freaking missed the boat, including ESPN. I mean, we couldn't see Luka's games on the NBA app like we could of Wembayama. But I'm telling you, I've been doing this since 2017. Luka's the best prospect I've ever seen.
Yeah,
okay?
I was going to conclude on that.
But he didn't get nearly this hype. And so
Right.
now they're like, oh, here comes another European guy. We don't want to miss the boat this time. So we're going to hype him up like we should have hyped up Luka. And, yeah.
Well, I don't think the hype around him is unwarranted, though.
Oh,
I think Like the level of it is extreme, right? And that's where it gets into what you're talking about in terms of we're going to hype this kid up to bring in viewers, right? But I genuinely think like the skill set that he does have and that he is experimenting with could go in a direction of a player that we haven't really seen before. I mean, like to go back to that second summer league game, the play where he tipped the ball up off of the glass and dunked it off of his second jump.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a player in the NBA that can do that. I think we need to look at him more as a developmental player, as instead of he's a ready-made prospect, which is how he's been billed. And I really think like at his size and he does have a genuine feel for the game, and the shooting touch is there, even though it's not fully developed. Right, the point that he can get to is pretty scary, honestly. I mean, the ceiling is what people are going for with a player like Wembanyama, not necessarily who he is right now.
I've just seen it for so long that and I don't know why other people don't have the jaded point of view that I do. I mean, Dragan Bender, Deontis Montiunas, KP,
Andrea Bargnani.
Huh?
Andrea Bargnani.
Well, not
he wasn't this high, but
he couldn't handle. He couldn't handle like. And Bargnani could score. I mean, there was no. He could score. He could put up 20 points a night easy. But who was the other kid that the Pistons took like number 5?
Draco Milishek.
Yeah, I mean, we could go back to all these bigs, and it just keeps on coming and coming. Chet, and the people just flip out because the guy's 7'3" and can dribble and can make a spin move and maybe a step back move, but you know what? They can't do it consistently in the game because there's guards like Marcus Smart and Rajon Rondo and Gary Payton II that will just take that ball away from you in a heartbeat and score on the other end.
You're right, Rich, but I like as a shooter, if he continues to find that efficiency, there's not a player in the league that can challenge his shot. I mean, like if he comes in the league and he's
KPs either.
No, but again, like I think Wembanyama's defensive ceiling's higher than KP's.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with KP's injuries. I mean, KP was on the trajectory to be.
But did you not also see him miss bunnies?
Wembanyama could be.
Did you not see him miss bunnies from 1 foot away in summer league, which is something he consistently did in France?
And Wembanyama was on his ass quite a bit too.
Oh yeah, and
he was. He's got to get stronger. He's got to continue to work on that coordination. But he's more coordinated, I would say, than Chet was last year. I think Chet improved in that area year to year. Right, he was working on his movement. He was working on rehab all summer, and he came back and he looks more fluid. I think Wembanyama is going to get there at least physically. I mean, if all that he becomes is a spot-up shooter that you can't challenge and a rim runner that can protect the rim, he's a max player guaranteed.
Oh, well, yeah.
I mean, like that's good value.
So is Desmond Bain. So
apparently, but he can't protect the rim.
Right. No.
I still like, is he going to live up to the crazy hype? Probably not. But is he going to be a really good player? Like, I mean, the same thing with Anthony Davis, right? That's why he's on here. People were calling him Tim Duncan, right? That wasn't going to happen.
Well, Anthony Davis was one of the most dominant college basketball players I ever saw.
He was. He truly was. But was he Tim Duncan? I don't know.
I don't remember Tim Duncan well enough, but yeah, to make the comparison.
I think we can all agree none of us are on the Booney boat, right? none of us think Victor's going to be a massive flame out bust.
No.
Yeah, okay. I know that we've been harsh a little bit, but like,
and I think most of the guys on this list, rookies ready to make an impact, I think are going to be in the running for Rookie of the Year. You know,
Absolutely.
I think this is like the early rookie of the year list. All right, so let's move on to Cam's team. Let Cam talk about Hunter Tyson, who probably could have been considered perhaps the MVP of Summer League. Go, Cam. He was incredible.
Yeah, man. Like having done the draft grades article and still working on our sort of off-season grades article that's going to be coming out soon. Hunter Tyson was like the one guy that kind of saved the Denver draft for me.
Right.
And it was really like exciting to see him come out and prove it in Summer League, or at least warrant some of like my praise and our praise as a group. He shot like a blistering 50% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. Right. That's a pretty big volume base, and to shoot that efficiently was really, really impressive. I mean, he was shooting the skin off of the ball. And really like defenses started keying on him because he was really like one of the only things Denver had going offensively at Summer League. And he was he was getting himself open off of cuts. He was backdoor cutting the living crap out of, who were they playing? He might have been the Raptors Summer League crew. Doesn't matter. I mean, he was moving without the ball incredibly well.
Yeah, he did that at Clemson too.
Yeah, he was great at that at Clemson. And that's why I really liked the pick, because he's a guy that doesn't need the ball at all to be effective offensively. And defensively, I was pretty happy with what he produced.
Yeah. He's not a bad athlete at all.
No, he's a really, like, I would say he's a plus athlete.
Yeah.
Even at his size. But like, I don't know, like, I just want to test you guys real quick. If you had to just guess what position in overall scoring he ended up across all players in Summer League, what would you say?
In the history of Summer League?
In Summer League this season.
Oh.
Like points per game or total points game?
Points per game.
He had to be the top 10.
Third?
Yeah,
he was easily in the top 10.
He finished 7th. And this guy was their 3rd pick in the draft.
Right.
Like
well,
the Denver's
but mind you, we said
we liked him most.
We liked him the most.
Yeah. No, yeah. And don't get me wrong, the other guys looked fine. Like they actually produced. Like Strother and Pickett, they looked good.
Yeah.
Hunter Tyson was the best player on their Summer League roster, barring maybe the 2 games of Peyton Watson that we got to see.
Right.
No, he looked so ready for the moment, so ready to immediately contribute in Denver's offensive scheme. He looked like he could hold his own defensively. He was rebounding. He was doing a little bit of everything. Just a great Summer League performance from Hunter Tyson.
Right. Moving on, another player for Houston is the Summer League MVP, who we touched on before. Cam and I were talking about Cam Whitmore. Drew, you have anything to add here?
Yeah, first off, God, it's going to bother me for the next 10 years that we didn't take this dude. The Warriors didn't take him. I already can see it.
Well, there's going to be about 15. I think there's going to be about 15 teams that are going to be thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, I think right away with Cam Whitmore, going back to our mock draft, I actually believe I took him 3rd to the Blazers just because of fit and everything. And I'm not saying that this is validating. Again, it's Summer League.
Fourth.
But I mean, right away, the big selling point was he was one of the youngest kids in the draft.
Yeah.
At least among the
top 10 youngest. Yeah.
Yeah. And just the physical prowess was right there. And when we talked about it, I was like, he's going to have a transition where we always talk about so many guys who build their body. He really doesn't. You have to learn to control it more and work on some of the more finesse skills. But from a running, jumping standpoint, he's going to have it. And that's what we saw. I mean, some of the breakaway dunks he had, the finishes down the lane. I mean, he had 8 steals in a game. And unlike some other players where, Cam made the point where guys are reading, like Tari was reading the game well. Sometimes it was just, I'm a better athlete than you. I'm going to take the ball and you can't stop me. And you know what? That's totally fine if you're 19 years old and able to do that against, again, a group of guys that have all either played professional or high-level basketball for the last couple of years. He definitely, especially as, Tari is, as guys are getting shut down, he definitely started chucking. I mean, he was shooting almost 9 threes a game, I think, which is not his game. But there were still moments and flashes. I mean, he had a couple, where he'd have a nice sidestep and bang it. a couple of nice pull-ups. So, I mean, the skill set is there. It needs to be refined and kind of catch up to the athleticism. But, I mean, you're going to get solid production on the glass. He pulled down 5 boards a game just off of the athleticism, the strength. You know that defensively, from a physical standpoint, he's going to hold up well 1 through 4. And if teams want to play small, he can guard damn near anybody on the basketball court in most situations, just from a physical standpoint. The steals, you're like, as his IQ gets sharper, that's only going to increase because now he's going to start getting steals. You combine the speed and the quickness with the IQ. I mean, I just think that it's not all great. Like I said, he was chucking some shots. The free throw form wasn't great. But the fact that this guy was taking almost 18 a game and still shooting 45% from the field is just, I think, a testament to just the raw athletic ability and the raw skill that's there. And 3 to 4 years, if he sharpens that, I think Cam Miller is going to be a force in this league. I just thought he played really well. And like I said, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to look back and go, we let this guy fall because the college coach says his attitude. He looked pretty dialed in and he interviewed pretty well. We go back to some of the interviews. He seemed pretty dialed in and pretty focused, especially as he got to take on more of a responsibility as some of the veteran guys sat. So I just really solid performance by Whitmore.
Yeah, I agree. All right, another guy who maybe slid a little in the draft because his season tailed off. He got, I believe he sprained an ankle, missed a few games, and then came back when he was 100%, never seemed to recapture it. And I'm talking about Keontae George, drafted by Utah Jazz. Keontae, too, probably has a little bit of a reputation as a chucker, but I think at Summer League he played under control. And I think the one thing I have said repeatedly, I think this guy has upside as a playmaker, can be a point guard. And that's exactly what he did. Overall, he averaged 26 minutes a game, so that's not a huge number, but good number. And he played in 6 games too. 19 points per game, shot 46 from the floor, 39 from deep, 75 from the foul line. Chuck threw in the 3.7 rebounds, 5.3 assists per game, 1.3 steals. His assist turnover ratio was 2.9. That is lovely. So now the question in my mind does Keontae George make an impact, but could he end up by the end of the season being the Utah Jazz's starting point guard? The other options are Colin Sexton, who's not a pure point guard, and the other one is Chris Dunn, who's not even on a guaranteed contract. What do you think, Christian? Keontae George going to end up starting for the Jazz before the season's over?
Sure, why not? I mean, I think that it's tough just because Sexton is the veteran, and so basically, if he does start over him for future trade value, you're basically saying we're done with this guy. We don't have much faith in them. Right. But if it's just on a pure, we like this guy better, we think he has a better future, then yeah, absolutely. But maybe he ends up playing like 34 minutes a game, and Sexton's still the ostensible starter.
Yeah, right. Kind of like Keegan Murray, I mean, he got a lot of minutes even though Harrison Barnes started last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts about Keontae George? I mean, I just think his shot creation, he was one of the better shot creators in this draft, and he continued to show that. Shot at a good clip, not something he did, especially when he tailed off at the end of the season. The one thing I'm concerned about is ultimately he was shut down in Summer League because he came down hard, rolled his ankle really hard. And he's one of a couple of players who came in with an injury history and had to be shut down because of an injury. And I think, one thing we're going to see in the future with the way the money is stacking up in the NBA, one of the things they're going to start emphasizing more is durability. I think that's going to start like with Zion. I mean, what's the one thing we can say about Zion coming out of Duke that we were worried about? We worried about his weight and then the potential injuries that could lead to. And we saw that at Duke, where he blew up his shoe and he got hurt. And then he was hurt for something else too, So we knew we could see it, guy this heavy, man, all that pounding, on his lower body, and he's bound to get hurt. Well, what have we seen? The guy's hardly played because he's always been hurt. So that's my biggest concern with Keontae George is, can he stay healthy? But he has lost weight. He has lost weight, since since he began the season at Baylor. He's gotten in better shape. He's in better shape now than he was when he started the season with Baylor. So at least he's on the right track and moving in the right direction. And of course, he wasn't nearly as heavy as Zion, nothing like that. So, yeah. All right, we'll move on. Next guy up is Asir Thompson. And the one thing I want to say, and, I've been very skeptical of Overtime Elite, and why shouldn't I be? I'm one of those guys, I'll believe it when I see it. And Asir played a lot more than Amen, because Amen too sprained an ankle, and he was shut down after one game. But Asir certainly wasn't the first or second option offensively, and so we didn't see a lot. He wasn't putting up 20 points a night every night. I'll just tell you what he did score. I think it was around 12, 13 a game. It was 13 and a half a game, and he played 30 minutes a game. And his shooting splits were so-so, 47 from the floor, 27 from deep, 65 from the line. So, but what I was really impressed about was his defensive playmaking, his defense overall, and his passing. And this guy, both brothers, when they're in transition, they can make some beautiful plays, either finishing themselves or finding the open player. And both of them also do a great job of, moving off the bounce in the half court, drawing the defense in them, and finding the open guy. And so that, you throw in their size, their ball handling, their athleticism. It's a nice combination. The question is, what really can they be stars? I think is, can they shoot? And Asir, was the better shooter at Overtime Elite. So we shall see. But any comments on the Thompson twins?
Yeah,
Okay.
Mitch, just bouncing off of what you said, I was really surprised at just how really polished they were in every other aspect of the game other than shooting.
Right.
Right. And that was what we expected their shots to be kind of rough. And I think Asar kind of confirmed that, because he's clearly the better shooter between him and Amen. But I mean, like you said, the rebounding, the defensive presence, the passing vision and IQ, right? The ability to draw to and kick was really, really on display, especially with Asar. And man, their athleticism, I think I kind of took it for granted because the OT is kind of like AAU plus.
Right.
In my mind, it was just these guys are popping off the screen more so because of who they're playing against.
Right.
More so than their actual athleticism. And I mean, they have that type of athleticism that makes them seem 3 inches taller than they really are, right? They're catching lobs off 2 feet with no running jump, right? They're blocking shots out of the middle of nowhere. Cutting through holes that average people can't make.
Right.
If they can figure out their shots, I really I see where the hype was with them. Because everything else is polished. Everything else, they're ready to contribute.
Asir, by the way, averaged in 4 games, playing almost 30 minutes a game, averaged 4 combined blocks and steals per game.
Yeah.
Here's what impressed me. The first time I watched him in Summer League, I was like, and he made some kind of really nice play in transition. And I'm like, I saw him do that play 10 times in Overtime Elite. And it doesn't seem any different. And that's the thing. The guys were bigger, stronger, faster than they were at Overtime Elite. And yet he still looked the same, And I think I'm repeating what you just said. But yeah. Christian, you had a comment.
Oh no, just saying. I thought they looked good. Not too much to add to that. You guys put the nail on the head. They look like they're ready.
Alrighty.
Ooh,
All right.
I will say real quick, Rich,
Yeah.
with the two Rockets guys, with Whitmore and Amen, something that really impressed me was that they were both still popping off the screen, even though they were sharing the court with Jabari and Tar Eason.
Right.
Great
Right,
point.
that really shows like that their talent is worthy. Because I mean, man, they're sharing the court with the two guys who were top 3 in scoring across summer league, and they're still contributing. They're still finding other ways to affect the game. I thought that was really, really impressive for both guys.
Yep.
Really good point.
And that's what you want to see. You know, if you contribute without the ball, especially for guys, are not, great shooters. All right. Sit back, gentlemen. Close your eyes and just listen. Cam is going to tell us, I told you so, about Kobe Brown of the LA Clippers, a man without a position, but certainly a man with a job.
Let me just bask in a little bit of ego. I'm feeling ego. I don't know. No, man, I gotta temper myself a little bit because I've seen this story too many times. Like,
Right.
guy has a real breakout game, and I get excited, and I'm like, "Yep, good analysis, Cam. You got it there." But I really see it with Kobe Brown. It was quiet for the first couple of games. He wasn't getting a whole lot of shots. He didn't have the ball in his hand a whole lot. But man, he really broke out against the Sixers Summer League team. And that's like a veteran group too, right? He's going against guys like Lou King, Greg Brown, Jaden Springer, guys that have been around the league, know how to defend at an NBA level. And man, he went off. He had 35 points, 13 of 19 from
I think
the
he had
field.
37 too, I think, actually.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I thought 35 seemed low, but that was the listing I found on online. But
Well, I watched the game. I thought he had 37.
I thought he did too. But yeah, I mean, 8 rebounds. The one thing he was doing consistently across all of his summer league games was he was rebounding really, really well. He was up between 8 and 10 pretty much every game. 4 steals in that game, 2 blocks. One of them was a really just nice chase down. He had no business getting to that ball. But I love his passing. I think that's the thing that makes him a really like powerful role player prospect is that, yeah, he can shoot. Maybe it's not super consistent and he's a little bit hot and cold, boom or bust, but he can really, really pass the ball. If he can draw 2, I mean, in that game, each of his 3 assists were really high level reads or really high level deliveries. He had one where he caught it in the middle of the paint. He pumped to draw the second guy and he threw it off with his offhand with spin to the corner. And I thought that was just a beautiful pass that you don't see a lot of guys make. But man, I love his all around impact. The 7 of 10.
And he did that at Missouri too.
From 3. That was the name of the game for him because he was basically their small ball center.
Right.
He had to score. He had to play make out of the high post. And I like to see that a lot of his opportunities were not him posting up. He was not the guy that was going to show up at Summer League and play the same way he did in college.
Right.
He moved his game completely out to the perimeter. And it took him a little bit to get adjusted and find the range.
Games he was,
It started slow, but he found it, man. And the next game, it looked like he was going to go on a heater again because he hit his first couple of shots and they pulled him. I think this guy's he's got the feel. I think he's going to be a really good role player for a long time. I think there's maybe a little bit of upside there. I love what he can do with the ball in his hands.
Can you hold on? I got to take this call. Yeah, Daryl. It's Daryl Morey. Hold on. Kobe Brown has to be part of the deal. Bones Highland, Terrence Mann, and Norman Powell. Norman Powell. They're the four guys I definitely want, and you could tell the Clippers. We definitely want Kobe Brown part of the deal. All right, talk to you later, Daryl. So there you go. I just
texted Jerry West. He said he's unavailable.
No, I was thinking when we were talking to our guest about the trade and about pieces we could get from the Clippers. I would want, if I'm the Sixers, I want Kobe Brown part of that package.
You gotta get something,
Yeah. All right, so now we're going to move on to another category called The Jury's Still Out. And we're going to lead off with the number 2 pick. I'm going to let Drew start us off. Brandon Miller, what do you think of Brandon Miller? A little up and down, especially early on.
Yeah, I mean, up and down is being a little generous. I mean, so I had the 2 full games that I watched from start to finish were the 2 he played in the California Classic, where I thought he looked okay. He shot pretty solid from 3. I mean, the raw box score looks pretty good, but he was turning the ball over a lot. He looked like he got sped up quite a bit. And then once he got to Vegas, those 3 games, the shot really wasn't falling from 3, and that was that was the big selling point. I know in his last game against the Trailblazers, he broke out for 26 points and looked pretty sharp. He was by far his best overall outing, but. I think there's shades almost to kind of like the Jabari Smith where we thought, okay, he's 6'10", he can shoot.
Oh, that's a great comparison. But you're right. The coming in to the league, can this guy really create? Can he really create?
And so from what I saw he's going to be very dependent on the mellow ball, I think, getting him set up, at least in this first year. And it's going to be on him to knock down the shots that he gets set up with. Because that Hornets-Lakers game was really tough to watch. I mean, he put up 7 threes, didn't hit a single one.
Is that the one where they started off with 5 points in the first quarter?
Yeah, I think that was. I mean, it was really tough. And and he was getting the shots. It wasn't like he's a role player getting 3-4 shots a game and you're like, it happens. I mean, he was shooting. He had double-digit shot attempts, almost 20 attempts in that game. So, I mean, you definitely see the outline there. I mean, you see the highs. He was pretty effective on the boards. He had some really nice playmaking. When I watched him play against the Warriors, he had a couple of really nice feeds. He had 7 assists that game. So, I mean, you see that, okay, there's an outline there, but I think he's going to be really dependent early on the higher profile guys, drawing that attention and then setting him up. And it's going to be up to him to knock down those catch and shoot attempts. This is not a guy who's going to come in and put the ball on the deck and pull up. I'm not saying it's out in summer league, but there were some really bad moments, but there were some good ones. I mean, he was really sharp from the free throw line for the most part.
Make or miss, his shot always looks pretty.
Exactly. And that's why I think in a large sample size, it's going to even out. I mean, we saw that. He was pretty sharp, like I said, in California, really bad when he got to Vegas, and then all of a sudden he goes 3 for 6, knocks down all of his free throws. So you're like, okay. It might also just be a nerves thing. Again, it's another level of speed. We're talking about, he was a one-and-done guy. He's still dealing with a lot of I'm sure there's some residual carryover from some of the stuff that went on with him. So I'm not saying the jury's out, but I think we're going to have to pump the brakes on him being, this automatic come in, score 20 points a game and shoot 40% from 3 rookie. It's probably going to be, I wouldn't be shocked if there's a Jabari Smith art. Kind of struggles, ups and downs. Comes into next year a little more confident and starts to realize that 3-and-D 6'10" potential.
Right. So the next guy on our jury still out list is Scoot Henderson. Now, Scoot his play was I know it was 20 some minutes, and then he had an injury. Does anyone remember the nature of the injury?
21 minutes, and I believe it was to his shoulder, if I'm not mistaken. I watched that.
Shoulder, right. And of course, Scoot, the things that plagued him in G League Ignite, were still a problem in this game in terms of field goal percentage, only 39, three-point percentage, only 33. Now, of course, this is 21 minutes of action. And of course, he was perfect for the line. But I just thought it was more of the same. And of course, he had 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 turnovers, 1 steal, no blocks. But to me, Scoot had such a mediocre season Probably statistically wasn't even the best player on his team this year. And throw in the fact that twice this season with Ignite, he had to shut it down due to injuries. And what happens? And, he can't make it to 25 minutes in his first, summer league game.
Yeah.
So to me, the jury's definitely still out, but I'll throw it to you guys. Anyone have an opinion otherwise?
I mean, I watched this is actually the same game that Amen went down to. They both got hurt, I believe, in this game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
This was their first game. So
yeah.
that was, I mean, that sucked. I mean, look, Scoot came out really hot in this game. He scored 13 of his 15 points in the first quarter. And like from a physical standpoint, it's hard not to, you see the strength, you see the speed. I mean, he was on full display. He had multiple drives where he just was able to collapse defenses, kick out the shooters. Despite Amen Thompson also being a great athlete and having him by at least 5 inches, he wasn't really able to speed Scoot up and like force him. His handle looks pretty sharp. I mean, like you said, it's 6 assists, only 2 turnovers. But again, the issue for me boiled down to just his shot selection. Once that mid-range pull-up kind of fade away at the elbow stop falling, I mean, that's what he does. And it's like 6'2". Can you rely on that shot when you're not a great shooter? I mean, I looked at the whole game. He only took 3 shots at the rim / the restricted area and 5 shots total in the point. And a couple of those were like barely 1 foot in the paint, like technically on the shot chart, it was in the paint, but it was like his foot was, barely on the free throw line kind of thing. So it was by no means a bad showing. You like to see that the physical skills definitely translate. The feel for the game looks sharp, but offensively, I just wonder, is he going to be able to live off of that steady diet of mid-range jumpers consistently? I don't know. I mean, it's, like you said, it's more of the same. You like what you see from the physical standpoint, but then, the ability to put the ball in the cup, you're like, it kind of was lacking. Once he got cold, he hit one more. I don't know. Actually, I think he hit another field goal. I think his last 2 points came on free throws, if I'm not mistaken. So he didn't hit a field goal after the first quarter, and then obviously goes down with an injury. So it wasn't bad, but he answered 0 questions in those 21 minutes.
Right. Anyone else on Scoot? All right.
Hey, I mean, it's hard to answer any questions about your game in 21 minutes.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's the problem.
It's not no knock on him,
right? But I mean, you do have to be a little concerned for a guy who has missed time twice last season. Now he's hurt again. I think just the nature of being that kind of athletic, smaller guard too. Like you got to show that you got other options than just hitting the rim as hard as you can. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to Washington's top 10 pick, and Bilal Coulibaly. Cam, what'd you think of him?
Man, this is a little bit of a spoiler for our next section, but I could move him down to our not ready for prime time section pretty easily. I was really expecting, like, I understood that Coulibaly was going to be more of a project type of pick. I wasn't expecting him to like blow me away.
Yeah,
but I was expecting him.
He is super young.
He is really young, and he had a late growth spurt. Those guys always take a little bit of time to adjust. But I was expecting a little bit more polish, especially since he was running point guard for Met in France, right? He made some of the worst turnovers I think I've seen in Summer League. I mean, just completely losing the ball, dribbling the ball off of people's feet, throwing the ball up. I mean, he had shooting turnovers, which I think should be a counted stat, where you take a god-awful shot and you airball it and the other team goes the other way. He had a few of those. I mean, talk about missed layups, missed dunks. The whole list of, ooh, that didn't look good sort of plays were on his sheet after his couple of games. The one thing that really I liked from him, he did look comfortable handling. Granted, there were some turnover issues, but they were really running him at the point throughout his summer league play. And the fact that even though he was he had some bad moments. He stuck in it, and he was still, he was taking care of the offense, getting them set up, and all those things. But man, I just, I knew he was going to be a project, but I wanted to see some flashes, and I didn't see any.
No,
I didn't see any.
I did see that smoothness, though. That kind of there's something about him, that's very smooth at times. And I did see that, when everything was going right. Keep in mind, this is a guy that we were told by by one scout who was told by a European scout that he thought Koulibaly was the best European player in this draft. So Washington must have been thinking somewhat along those lines to take him number 6 overall, right? And I kind of like raised my eyebrows and rolled my eyes because I'm like, this guy didn't even start the season playing for Met 92. So Met 92 didn't even think he was good enough to play for them at the beginning of the season. And so that's why and that was around Portsmouth. And so now, once I started watching him, especially in the playoffs, I became more and more impressed with him, But I still thought he went too high in the draft. I thought when Drew took him 12th in our mock draft, I said, I think that's a little high. And then when Washington took him 6th, I'm thinking, that's too high. So, but yes, one of the youngest players in this draft class, and he's on a perfect team. They can take the youngest guys in the draft class because it's going to be a while before Washington's a factor again. So yeah, again, I mean, how many games did he play in? 4?
He played 4.
Yeah.
He played 4 games, 30 minutes per game.
Right. So yeah, it's a decent sample for summer league, but overall it's a small sample. So yeah, we shall see. But yeah, definitely looks like you could definitely move him to doesn't look ready. Christian's a dookie, and we'll move on and see what he thought about Derek Lively.
Excuse me 1 second. Derek Lively, I think he kind of does follow on that curve of summer league player where I think that his performance was considered decent, good, but I feel like when you're an athletic big, and he did make some athletic big plays, but I think when you're an athletic big, the expectations are a little higher for you to dominate and just to be able to rack up a lot of points because the height differential in summer league is pretty intense. And I didn't really see that as much. It's kind of like a little bit of a worrying sign for me to only have a mediocre to good. Now, he did make some good plays in terms of he did show the ability to at least start passing out to open shooters. So good on that front to being a little bit more coordinated on the offensive end. But kind of would hope to see just a little, and defensively, he showed the ability to switch out, but kind of was hoping for a little bit more domination from somebody's going to be like 3 or 4 inches taller than everybody.
I was a little disappointed in his rim protection. Now I know that he's not playing the same type of defense, and he's not, but 0.6 for blocks for a guy who was, in the running for being the best shot blocker in this draft class. Now he only played 23 minutes per game, 5 games. But yeah, only 0.6 blocks per game. Also 1.8 turnovers, and an assist turnover ratio of 0.4. That's disturbing. That can happen. Neither of those things can happen for Derek Lively to be a factor this year. He's got to block shots, he's got to rebound, and he can't turn the ball over. And he only did one thing out of those 3 things, and that was rebound. Yeah, so I agree. A little bit mixed bag, kind of like Koulibaly. At times you were like, okay, this is the guy I thought. And then you were like, sometimes you were covering your eyes and just kind of peeking in between the fingers to see, because you didn't want to completely look because it was a little ugly. But yeah, and the other thing, 53% from the foul line, 8 of 15. So I saw an interview with him and he's talking about how he can shoot. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't you try making 70% of your foul shots? And then we'll talk. So, all right. So next guy on our jury still out list is Grady Dick. I actually did not get to see Grady Dick in Summer League. The one game I tuned in to watch, he wasn't playing. So I suppose I waited too long. So Cam, you got a couple notes here in the script. What do you think of Grady Dick?
Phew, I got to watch him. The shot was shockingly bad.
What do you mean by that?
He was over 7 attempts per game.
Right.
From 3, that's a healthy number. It's a big dose.
Yeah.
29.8%.
Oh, but you don't mean you don't mean his form was bad though.
I mean, the form's pretty.
Yeah, right.
But it doesn't go in.
Right.
They weren't particularly high difficulty shots either. I mean, he was shooting mostly off a spot up. That's my major concern. Everything else,
that's Grady Dick's calling card.
Exactly. That's why I was shocked when I looked at the numbers. I mean, I wasn't shocked because I saw him missing them all, but I was just like, I was wowed because that was his number one NBA skill, right? That was his pivot skill. That was the thing that was going to make him a league type guy for years to come. And I was just not expecting him to shoot that poorly. But everything else he did better than I was expecting, right? He was better off the dribble. He was better self-creating. He was better rebounding than I expected him to be. He played a little bit stronger than I expected he would. So that's kind of where he fits in as like we don't really know yet type of prospect. I'm sure, right? Again, it's not a huge sample size. His is a little bit bigger than most of these summer league rookies is.
Right.
But I think the thing that I saw was he needs to get a little bit stronger. Yeah. And that's going to help him extend that range out to the 3 pretty easily.
Yeah.
But didn't prove it.
Shooting, 3-point shooting is probably the least thing I worry about, in summer league. And I know that sounds weird on a guy whose real major feature is supposed to be 3-point shooting, but even Steph Curry can have 3 or 4 bad games, in a row. So shooting is something that can come and go, especially if you're a little nervous. So I'm not, but I agree. Jury's still out. I mean, if this guy's supposed to be a knockdown shooter, one of the best shooters, if not the best shooter in the draft, same thing happened to Jordan Hawkins, who we'll talk about later. But yeah. All right. So moving on, Cason Wallace, Drew, you probably saw him a lot. Christian, I know you saw him a fair amount. So I'll let either you guys got any comments about Cason Wallace. I thought he hit, from a shooting standpoint, I thought he did pretty well. I thought he looked pretty good defensively. I didn't study him, but
Yeah, the variance is so high when looking at actually making the number of shots. That really is what I'm looking at, is the number of shots that players are taking when they're trying to improve. And I think that he knows, the understanding that shooting is his swing skill. If he can shoot, he can play in the NBA. And he came out and shot 6 attempts per game compared to his 4 in college. And he was playing less minutes, and he was only playing 25 minutes. So I think that is just showing the right direction. And of course, he did actually shoot well. He shot 37%, even though it's difficult to take such a small sample size. But yeah, I think it's just a promising sign for somebody that shooting was kind of the knock on him, that he is willing to start taking them, and making them doesn't hurt either.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Drew.
Oh, I was going to say, I think, I saw him quite a bit because obviously I was watching a lot of chat, and he shot statistically better from 3 than he did from the floor, which is always actually a worrying sign. But again, small sample size, you're kind of like, okay, it was very clear that he was shooting the 3 ball with intent. That he made it a point to shoot. And he took 10 in the first game, and he was hot. Took 6 in the last game. I mean, he took, I think, on average 6 a game. So, like Christian said, But yeah, I think Casey Wall is another of those guys who overall I feel pretty confident. I mean, the defensive intensity is there. And while I'm not saying this is going to be a Steph Curry-like shooter, he shot almost 35% or 39% from three. I think that's more realistically going to be in the mid-30s, like 34, 35. And I think that's a serviceable number for a guy where we had questions about it. So I thought he was okay. Is he going to be a massive impact? I mean, no, obviously this is a Thunder team that's looking for Shea and Josh Giddey to, really be at the forefront of their, perimeter and ball handling duties. But I thought he was okay. Again, I'm more concerned with the fact that he had a 2-game stretch. He was under 30% from the floor as a whole than anything.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Jett Howard, who I said Orlando taking him 11th overall was the worst pick in the draft. Jett Howard only got 3 games in, wasn't good from the field, 39%, but on almost 7 attempts per game, shot 40% from 3. And again, he's another one. Shooting was his calling card. And again, it was basically kind of what you would expect from Howard. His defensive numbers were a little better than expected. I think he showed a little more playmaking, didn't show much rebounding for a 6'7", 6'8". Also, turnover prone. He almost averaged 3 turnovers per game. I just, all in all, I didn't see enough to say, okay, to change my mind that the Magic did the right thing by taking him 11th overall. I don't know if you guys have a different opinion. Anyone?
No,
Okay.
I think we're all with you on that one, Rich.
Step in the right direction, but
yeah, no, I think he shooting 40%. They brought him in as a shooter, but we talked about, okay, is that what you do with the 11th overall pick? With a guy like Howard or Dick or Hawkins, is that really what you want to be doing there? But anyway, all right, so we'll move on. Other guys that made our list of jury still out: Anthony Black, Jordan Walsh, Jaime Jaquez, who was limited to 1.5 games, and Taylor Hendricks, who didn't play at all, I believe because of a hamstring. I believe it was hamstring. I'll just briefly say about Anthony Black. I actually saw the last time I saw him was one of his better games. But and I thought he looked fantastic. But overall, his numbers were kind of reminiscent of his play at Arkansas. Only 41% from the field, only 17% from deep, 55% from the foul line, but then he grabbed almost 9 rebounds a game, had 4 assists per game, 2 steals per game, and 0.7 blocks per game. He had a disappointing assist turnover ratio of 1 because he also averaged 4 turnovers per game. That can happen. So, Anthony Black, we've talked about his swing skill. Well, actually, I think he has 2. He's got to improve as a shooter, no matter what he does. But then, I think the reason why he was taken. Oh, I was mistaken, by the way. Coulibaly was 7th. Black was the 6th overall pick. The reason why he was taken 6th overall by the Magic, I think, is with the hope that he would be a big point guard. And so, mixed results. Like I said, the one game I saw him, he's pretty fantastic, but I can't say that about every game, obviously, with those types of numbers. Anybody else have any comments on Black, Walsh, Jaquez, or Hendricks?
Yeah, I mean, Walsh really stood out to me. I was really pleasantly surprised at how far along he was in each of his games. He really showed more in his summer league appearances than I think he ever really did at Arkansas. He showed that he was a really smart cutter. He really showed that his jump shot is a whole lot better than it looked at Arkansas. Not something that he particularly really showed off a whole lot to begin with in college. He shot a tiny bit over 40% actually from 3, which I was not expecting. But I think, again, like we kind of knew he was going to have a defensive impact. I think he had that, but I think he showed maybe just maybe he can crack the rotation a little bit sooner rather than later, based off of what he was able to do for the Celtics Summer League squad.
Yeah, I've been saying that every time I see Jordan Walsh, he looks a little better. Seriously, he just does. He was so tentative early on in the season with Arkansas on the offensive end. Every time I see him, he shows me a little something more. So yeah, I think it was a good pick by the Celtics. All right, moving on to our next category is the bottom of the barrel, rookies who didn't look ready for prime time, and a couple of players on here would be surprising. I'm going to start off with Noah Clowney. I don't think it's a huge thing that he didn't play tremendous. Again, another really young player. But Cam, what'd you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not really unexpected, but he was so physically unprepared for even the summer league level of play and physicality. I got the chance to watch the Nets Cavs summer league game, and my God, Isaiah Mobley just abused him. Granted, Isaiah Mobley was doing that to a lot of different guys, but that was like Clowney was the one guy that Mobley was targeting, like physically targeting. His shooting splits were really bad. He was 22% from the floor. Couldn't finish, couldn't shoot. It was just a real rough showing for him. Only 5.4 rebounds per game. I still like him a lot. It's going to take him some G League time to beef up a little bit, get stronger, work on his game.
Yeah, very slender, very slender. All right, Drew, we're going to talk about Brandon Podziemski. His struggles were talked about a lot, social media, on TV. What do you make of him?
Yeah, I just think that this is a guy who the bones of a good basketball player are there. He competes. I have firsthand experience. My NAIA school played Santa Clara, so I saw him firsthand, talked to their staff. This guy competes. I do think he has a really good head on his shoulders in terms of passing the ball. Like, he did make a couple of passes, especially when Trace came back. There was a couple of really nice reads where he found working the baseline. He makes some nice passes. He'll rebound or he'll try to. But the big concern is this is a sped up level of play where he's dealing with guys who either are or have been like professional basketball playing level of athletes and stuff, and he just looked overmatched. Getting the shot off wasn't consistent. He was horrible from the floor. He had multiple games where he was under 30% or right around 30% from the floor. Couldn't really hit a three to save his life. The turnovers, he was at almost 4 a game. And so, the assist numbers look good. He had a one game where he had 10 assists. He was turning the ball over, and there were plays that he was making where you could see what he was thinking. The cutter he was trying to hit, the pass he was trying to make, you could see it, but he just isn't quick enough, just not strong enough to get the ball where it needs to go. I just worry that the issues he has aren't things that more playing time can fix. I think his IQ for the game is there, but I'm just worried that there's limitations physically that he's not going to be able to make up for, and just that the stat sheet stuffing, was great at the WCC level, but you don't need to be rebounding is great at the G League. I don't know. I just am really concerned that he's not going to be able to make up the gap. And when you see the difference between Cam Whitmore was able to score easily because of the athleticism. He was going to get those buckets just naturally because he's big, he's fast, he's strong. And Podziemski had to work so hard just to get contested threes off at times. And that ain't going to – if you can't do that in Summer League, you sure as hell aren't going to do that in the NBA. So,
right.
I have a lot of fans who I think are a little – friends who are a little delusional. but he had 10 assists in the game. He almost had a triple-double. I'm like, yeah, and he was 18% from the floor. That's great, but he couldn't put the ball in the bucket at all. And he wasn't really able to guard anybody at all. So, yeah, great. You had 9 rebounds in a Summer League game. I don't know, man. I'm kind of worried about this pick. as hard as he tries, I don't know if he's ever going to be able to catch up to the rest of the pack.
Okay. I think one of the bigger disappointments for us was probably Jordan Hawkins, a guy that we all seem to like, and but Jordan came up short. What do you think, Christian?
I think this is kind of as simple as shooter who can't shoot. I mean, during the first 5 games of Summer League, I think the most concerning stat is that a 90% free throw shooter only shot 11 for 20 from the line during Summer League. I know that seems like a small sample size, but your odds of being a 90% free throw shooter and shooting less than 11 out of 20 or 11 out of 20 is about 1 in 200. So I gotta imagine that there's something wrong. And it also translated to his 3-point shooting, that they just must have did something really off. Because everything is riding on him being amazing at shooting. So yeah.
Right. And to me, that comes down to nerves, focus, something of that nature. I would actually be encouraged to see that number where it is, and then see, 32% from the field, 25% from deep, 55% from the foul line. So foul line is the same distance everywhere for everybody. And the fact that he was so far off means you're right. I think something isn't, so that makes me encouraged that, once he relaxes, once he gets into a rhythm, he'll be okay.
It's not due to increased competition, it's due to himself. That's basically what you said.
Right, because the foul line,
there's no other players when he's at the free throw line. Yeah, there's no players.
Right. And I'll give you an example. At Connecticut, he shot freshman season 35% from the field, jumped up 60 points to 41 next year. Shot 33% from deep. Freshman season moved up to 39%, another 60-point jump. So, but foul line though, he also made a 60-point jump. He went from 82 to 89, but still, bottom line is 87 for his career. So yeah, I hear you. You hope it's not something physical, just kind of more of a case of jitters or whatever. But this kid went from being kind of like an afterthought as a freshman to one of the best players in the country as a sophomore. So,
right.
All right. So we're going to talk about a Tennessee player next. A guy we thought had a shot at an outside shot of being a late first round pick. I think he was number 30 on our draft board, which was generally higher than most. Really liked his athleticism, really liked his effort, but off his offensive game, very raw. And I'm talking about Julian Phillips from Cam's alma mater of Tennessee. And he's probably a combo forward, probably could play, small forward, power forward but right now he's also on the thin side. So Cam, I'll let you talk a little more about Julian Phillips.
Yeah, Julian Phillips is finally free of the Rick Barnes soul box, but we're still seeing the after effects of his time at Tennessee. I was kind of expecting this. He didn't get a ton of run at Tennessee, and I think the Bulls summer league team I just don't think it was a very well constructed team. They didn't have a lot of guys.
No.
And so he kind of got thrown into a little bit more than I think he was ready for to begin with.
Yeah, he was starting at power forward.
Yeah, he is playing some pretty major minutes for them. And again, I think he is more of a 3.
Yeah, he's less than 200 pounds. He's under 200 pounds.
Yeah, he's
playing power forward.
A little bit of the Noah Clowney, physically outmatched.
Right, exactly.
But he showed off the athleticism at times. He had some really nice athletic rebound dunk plays, some putbacks in there. And the thing that I was really pleasantly surprised with him was his shooting percentage. Because this is a guy that really didn't shoot the ball much at all from the outside at Tennessee. and the jumper looked good. He was
yeah, it does.
44%
It does.
from
That's
three.
why I had him 30 on our draft board. I thought he
Yeah.
could become a nice shooter.
Yeah, and he showed it. Like the one game where he was really kind of in his element, he shot really, really well from three. Most of it, obviously, is spot up opportunities, but I think that's just fine for his play style. I don't think he's ever going to be an ISO type of guy. But if he's an athlete that's contributing on the boards and as a 3-point shooter, that's just about the right spot for him. But again, he wasn't ready to contribute. I don't think any of us were expecting that from him, but he wasn't ready yet. He got thrown in too many minutes at summer league level, and that kind of shows you the trajectory that he's currently on. He's going to need some development.
Did you ever hear of someone named Josiah Jones, a Harvard student? He did his doctoral thesis on Rick Barnes. And in this thesis, he found out that leaving the University of Tennessee was worth at least 6 to 7 points per game.
I'm going to have to look this up. Are you bullshitting me right now, Rick?
Leg. I just made that up, but you can imagine leaving Rick Barnes and your shooting average going up 6 to 7 points just from walking out the door.
I'm guessing that Kevin Durant is a big contributor to that outlier.
All right, so one more guy we're going to talk about that didn't look ready for primetime, who we were super high on, and probably I'd say from hoops prospects as a collective may have been the biggest disappointment in summer league. That was Andre Jackson. I'm not going to go through all his dismal numbers, but 33% from the floor, 2.4 assists per game for a team. We thought Milwaukee might want to use him, as a lead ball handler sooner rather than later. And so 2.4 assists, 3.6 turnovers per game. He made 2 of 10 from deep. The only thing he really did well was rebound. He's an excellent rebounding guard. Am I scared? Well, a little bit. I'm a little worried. Andre Jackson is not like an 18-year-old guy. But what do you guys think? He's 21 years old to be exact. Any thoughts?
I agree that look at the raw numbers and you're like, God, it's not super pretty, but I still think the value of this guy is going to be when it's under 2 minutes to go in a tight game and he's going to pin someone, take it the other way, and then make an outstanding outlet pass for a layup. And so, it's not great, but there were still moments. There was that one possession where he came back, made a transition block, made 2 blocks in a row to defend the rim, 1-on-3 break, and he stands his ground and makes a play. And that's what you drafted him for. So, the offense is worrying, but we knew that coming in. He had a game where he had 4 steals. He had a game where he had those 2 blocks. I think he's going to find ways, and he's just got to, it's going to come more naturally. But I really hope the offense can get a little bit sharper. It's got to be better than 33% from the floor. So, that's the big thing. He's got to be a serviceable piece. Prime Draymond Green was serviceable on offense to the point where he wasn't a massive liability like he's becoming now. I still am holding out hope because I saw the glimpses of him making those plays. That's something that in this draft, not a lot of guys can do, and he can.
Right.
So I'm still holding out hope.
Top-notch athlete with a very, very high motor.
Exactly.
So that should definitely can't say that about most people. So but the only thing I'm concerned is right now Milwaukee does not have a backup point guard. And I was hoping, for Andre Jackson's sake, he would come out, average about 5-6 assists per game, and maybe have 2 turnovers a game. And I didn't care if he really scored much. I just wanted to see those numbers, and it wasn't there. So, all right. So moving on with the other players, and you guys let me know if you want to talk about any guys. And I promise you folks that these guys had disappointing stats, at least to some level. And they are Kobe Buffkin, Rayon Repair, Jerice Walker, Maxwell Lewis, he was pretty dreadful, and his teammate Jordan Hood-Schifino wasn't much better. So right now I have my doubts about how any of these guys are ready to contribute at any level. Cam, I see you have some thoughts on Jarice Walker.
Yeah, I mean, we got to talk about Jarris. I mean, this is the highest guy drafted that's in our not ready for primetime category. And
That's true. That's true.
I think a big part of that is the jump shot. It looked like his range was not even remotely close to being ready for the 3-point arc at the NBA level. Let me look real quick, but I know it was sub 20. Yeah, he was 17.9% from three on 7 attempts per game. So it wasn't the volume that was a struggle for him. He really couldn't find his stroke. Just 44% from the free throw line. He contributed well as a rebounder. He was running the break well. Defensively, I think he's closer to ready than not, right? I think he's 2.5 stocks per game, steals and blocks. Playmaking was pretty good, a couple of assists. But man, the jump shot was just ugly. And I think offensively that really dragged him down, because at Houston, it was the fact that you had to respect his shot that really opened up his individual game, because then he could take you off the dribble, go dunk on you. But man, he's got to work on that shot. It's not even remotely close to ready. But I think, give him a year.
Right.
With the athleticism, he'll be there.
Yeah, fantastic athleticism, especially for his size. One thing you can't say about him is he's, going to be pushed around like Clowney or somebody like that. It's just not going to happen with him. It shouldn't happen, at least. A fantastic combination of athleticism and size. We knew his offensive game was raw. He didn't get a lot of chance to show that at Houston, but more than some people, but yeah. Our next category for Summer League is pleasant surprises. And we have a lot of guys on this list, and we're not going to talk about all of them. We're going to talk about a guy I once considered, I think he was close to a lottery pick, I believe. And we're talking about Luka Samanic. Wasn't he close to a lottery pick, gentlemen?
He was picked 19 by the Spurs.
Yeah. So it's in that range, and I believe we had him on our board. Not so high. I think we had him in our top 30, though. We consider him a first-round pick, and he's been kind of not playing so great. But at the end of last season, he showed some signs of life, and I thought early on in Summer League, he was one of the players that definitely caught my eye. So, Cam, I know he caught your eye too. So, you want to talk a little bit about the other Luka?
Yeah, man, I've always been a fan of Samanic. I think, the thing that always got him kind of struggling in terms of his NBA minutes was that he's a little bit of a tweener. Offensively, his skill set's a little bit more of that of a three. He's a little bit more of a wing type forward. But I think also there were some defensive concerns with Samanic as far as his switchability and your ability to have sort of a top 15 above average defense if Samanic is playing a ton of minutes for you at the four. But I think offensively, he's always been there. I think offensively, he's always been at an NBA level. But over this summer league, I think he took a step up in terms of his offensive production. But he also produced respectable numbers as a rebounder. And he was solid defensively, even though he wasn't producing a lot of block shots or steals, any counting stats. I think and maybe this is a little bit of a summer league halo. He defended his position well, and I think that was in part because they were playing him pretty big minutes at a center position. And I think long term, that's his fit. He's going to be more of a small ball center option for a team that can produce for you as a shooter and as a a sort of spot ball handler and pick and roll options. But yeah, I love his game. I've always liked him. I was just happy to see him have a really good
He
performance.
hustles too, you know.
Yeah, he plays hard.
And
always.
though the numbers don't show it, I thought he made a number of impressive passes. He averaged 2.5 assists for 24 minutes. By the way, he averaged 0.83 steals and blocks per game. That's not bad for 23 minutes per game. I mean, when you total them together, that's almost one. Especially for a European guy. I don't know I don't know if it's their style of play, but they, most of them just don't average, a lot of high steals or blocks, even if they're capable of it. But it just doesn't happen. I don't know what that is. All right, good stuff. One of the guys I want to talk to is a guy we've kind of forgotten about, but I haven't. We once considered a lottery pick, but then some injury issues came up, and he fell all the way down to the 10th pick of the second round in 2021, 2 years ago. And that's Jared Butler of Baylor, was on that national championship team, arguably maybe the best player on that team. His rookie season, he played 42 games for Utah, but again, last year, Utah cut him. I think it was more injury stuff. And he only got into 6 regular season games for OKC. Played pretty well in the G League. And this summer, he also played pretty well. But believe it or not, this guy's still unsigned. I can't believe somebody doesn't want him on a two-way. But Jared Butler, this summer league, played about 23 minutes per game, 47% from the floor, 44% from deep, 94% from the foul line. Now we're talking like the numbers he used to put up at Baylor. Also 4.4 assists per game and 1.6 steals per game. Now remember, only playing 23 minutes per game, also 16 points per game. And this wasn't a small sample. He played in 7 games, summer league. So I suspect that Jared, I wouldn't be surprised. There are several teams out there that are starving for a point guard. And I'll be damned if I can figure out why they won't give like Jared Butler at least the minimum and, put him down as their third string point guard. I do some consulting for some European teams, and one of the teams was looking for a guard, a combo guard, which he is. He can play off guard. And guess who was number 1 on my list? Jared Butler. So I don't know. I think if he doesn't get a contract with an NBA team, he's going to get a nice contract with a European team. So there you go. Any thoughts on Jared Butler? All right. I'm going to talk about Xavier Moon, who's 28 years old, was one of the best players in the G League last year. He's only played 14 games in the NBA, but he was one of the stars of the G League last year. And another guy, I'm not sure why somebody doesn't have them as their third point guard. Come on, man. There's a point guard shortage. As I just said, Milwaukee Bucks don't have a number 2 point guard. But hear me out on Xavier Moon's numbers. 5 games, 28 minutes per game, 20 points per game, 55% from the floor, 58% from deep, 92% from the foul line, 5 rebounds a game for a 6'1" guard, 4.6 assists, and only 2.2 turnovers. So that's a assist turnover ratio of over 2. Also, 2.2 steals per game. And somehow this little guy averaged a block per game. This guy could just play, and he's too good for the G League. And somebody needs to sign Xavier Moon. Any thoughts there? How about you, Drew, on the West Coast? You must have caught Xavier Moon a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a point on the point guard, I guess, deficiency. I mean, we just talked about the Suns earlier in this episode, how if you're going to take a flyer on a guy to absorb, in theory, maybe just 8 or so minutes a game and then maybe step into a secondary role. Like, wouldn't you want a guy like Xavier Moon who was proven that, like, hey, I can do it? And he was dominant. I mean, shooting 50+% from 3. Like, that means he's getting to his spot at will, and he's got the feel for it. He's adjusted to the range of the pro game. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't watch like a bunch just because, there's so many games and everything. But I was just like, it was one of those ones where I'm flipping through. It's like, Xavier Moon just hit another step back 3. Xavier Moon just made another great. Like, you're just kind of like watching the game and you're hearing these names called and you're like, oh, that's a guy I haven't thought about. Like, Butler's another one. You're like, I haven't thought about that guy since he kicked the crap out of my Zags in the tournament a couple years ago. And so, I just think that's like another thing too. I think we're going to start seeing, and we've talked about the draft with like the CBA, and not to get too off topic, but like these veteran guys who started to prove themselves, I think are going to start getting into those roster spots instead of teams like holding on to this, like, these project guys who, they're a year away from being a year away. It's like, hey, I have a guy in Xavier Moon who, he's not going to come to the NBA and shoot 50+% from 3, but I need a guy who can absorb a couple minutes a game. And hey, something happens to my starting point guard. Can I trust him to run the show for a week or two while a guy rests up an ankle or something? Absolutely. I mean, he was dominant. He was dominant. He was one of, if not the best guard, probably throughout some of the league at times.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Another guy I want to talk about is Javon Freeman-Liberty. Another guy is unsigned, played for Chicago in Summer League. Javon's a bigger guard. He started off in the Missouri Valley Conference for, I believe it was Illinois State. No, Valpo. Played for Valpo for 2 years, then he played his last 2 years at DePaul. But what was really, he's always been a stat sheet stuffer. And in the Missouri Valley Conference, in his 2 years, he made all defensive team both years. And I think, though I couldn't find it, I thought he was Defensive Player of the Year in the Missouri Valley Conference one year, but I couldn't find that. But what stood out for me with Freeman-Liberty, now he was a rookie last year. When he and his season was shortened for some reason, I think he got hurt. And that's probably why he probably didn't get as much attention as maybe he deserved. But he finally started to make his threes in his senior season at DePaul. And that has carried over in the pros. He made his threes last year. Now, we're not talking like a 40% shooter. We're talking more like a 37% shooter. But he made his threes in the G League last year. And we're talking about a big guard who can rebound. He can pass. He plays defense. He's a good ball hawk. He might even be considered a shooting guard. I guess he's best described as a combo guard. And what he did this year in Summer League, I thought, again, one of the top performers, averaged 30 points per game, shot 49% from the floor, 46 from deep, 77% from the line, 4.6 rebounds per game, 4.4 assists, 0.6 steals, 1 block per game, 2.2 turnovers per game. Now, I think another thing that held Freeman back was, one, he didn't have the long history of being able to make threes. Number two, as we know, just got done saying his season was shortened by injuries, the senior season, and he also didn't test well at the combine. He was, below average athlete. But I'm not sure if he was 100% when he tested out. Actually, he was probably at Portsmouth. Anyway, point being, when you watch him play, you can see he's not blazingly fast, and he's a bigger guy. Probably could drop some pounds. But is he? I think he's worthy. He's still only 23 years old. I think he's worthy of a two-way contract, and I think if he can maybe tone up a little, he might be able to add a little more speed to his game, and continue to develop as a shooter. And certainly, again, when I consulted with this European team looking for a combo guard, he too is at the top of my list. Not as high as Jared Butler or Xavier Moon, because I just don't see the explosiveness so much in Liberty's game. But he does a little bit of everything. And so I would be surprised if the Bulls didn't sign him to a two-way. All right. So another guys or guys. Let's talk about this group, the winners of the Summer League Championship. They had 3, maybe you want to even say 4, excellent contributors. Amani Bates, Sam Merrill, Isaiah Mobley, who we mentioned multiple times, and I thought Mobley should have been the MVP of the Summer League. I just thought he was the most dominant player out there. So any of these guys, I know Cam wants to talk about Amani Bates, but if you guys want to talk about Merrill or Mobley, go right ahead. But Cam, we'll start with you on Bates.
Yeah, I mean, Bates went out and did exactly what he was billed for being at an NBA level, right? He went out, he shot the ball very, very well, especially when he was shooting out of spot up situations. He was borderline automatic. Just instant offense from him. Again, like, I can pull stuff from my scouting on him, like straight out of my reports. I mean, his rebounding is, I would say, above average for sort of, really, he's a 6'8" shooting guard.
Mm-hmm.
He rebounds very well, especially on the offensive end. He really likes to sort of straight line cut out of his spot up to go and mix it up on the boards. Matter of fact, they basically won a couple of their games off of that play from Bates. But man, it's refreshing to see him go out and feel comfortable in the NBA setting. Like, this is what he's been working for years, what he's been waiting for years. And I thought his interviews were excellent. Every time he opened his mouth, I was a little bit happier with what he was saying, except for maybe with Ja Morant being one of his number one role models. I didn't love that.
Especially for someone who was arrested. Bates was arrested for having a gun in the car.
That didn't sound great, but it seemed like they were commiserating a little bit, so that's cool. But man, he's on a 2-way deal. I would not be shocked if he spends more time with the Cavs than he does with their G League affiliate. I think at the very least, you can put him in for instant offense. And I think that this is a team that could use it in the Cavs. Say, the Max Strus contract is looking a little bit like an overpay. He's going to be the guy that they look to.
They also can turn that 2-way into Cleveland has like 3 open roster spots. So they can turn that 2-way and have him be, one of their regular roster spots. What impressed me about him was his hustle.
Yeah.
He really hustled. He really went after it on defense.
He had that one chase down block, and I was like, holy crap, am I sure that's Amani Bates? Did he just sprint the whole court and block a shot?
And here's what I was thinking when I was watching him. I was thinking, you know what? This is one of those rare times where most guys, come in and they're used to being the man and they don't know how to adapt. And here's a guy that, for whatever reason, has no problem adapting, and it's good because he's not an explosive athlete. He's going to be the kind of guy who's better, with the slide steps and the step backs and, maybe working off screens. You made a little face. Do you disagree that I don't think he's an overly explosive shot creator. I think he's more of a crafty shot creator.
He totally is.
Yeah. And so, I just, and I'm thinking, wow, this is a guy, if he's okay with this, he'll be great, for what
if anything, he might be refreshed by not being the guy. Yeah. Because he had to be at Eastern Michigan.
Right. And he wasn't
nobody else
efficient in Memphis. He wasn't efficient in Eastern Michigan. Yeah. No. Eastern Michigan was one of the worst teams in the country for the last 2 years. They were horrible.
Yeah.
I was so impressed. And you know what? You and I, Cam, both, during our draft grade process, we were like, why didn't this team do this and then take Amani Bates, with their next pick? We said that about 2 or 3 times. And, we were spot on, you know?
I mean, it's just like I sometimes I hate to see teams draft just off of high school hype.
Yeah. Right.
But Bates was different. He was a guy that was hyped for years because he was just that talented. He's always been this scorer. And the things he's doing now, he's been doing since he was in high school. He's basically the same player. I think he might be a little bit more mature, but that in terms of his game, nothing's different. He's the same guy. He's always been that guy.
I would disagree and say that teams should be drafting based off high school hype. I think the college, experience at the college level gets vastly overrated because it gets on TV. I think that you only get about 30 games to look at the players, and maybe 10 of them are actually useful. And, I think you really do have to take a serious look.
Those 30 games, though, are a hell of a lot more useful than their 30 games in high school.
Well, yes. I'm not saying that it should be high school should be more important, but just I think that, their pedigree coming in should be like, I think it's vastly discounted. It's maybe 10% of the process when it should be more like 30%.
Well, I mean, Drew can speak to this being a West Coast Conference fan. One of the guys, I'm just going to, the team I was advising and working with, they were looking at Rasheer Bolton, and somebody Drew's very familiar with. And I didn't hate their choice compared to their other options, but I thought they, if they waited a little more, waited like a week more and talked to a few more players that were higher, that I had higher. Like, for example, they couldn't get Eric Stevens, West Virginia. They couldn't get a hold of his agents, So not that I love Stevens that much more than Bolton, but that's not the point. There were other guys that still were definitely better than Bolton that they hadn't made contact with. But one of the things I said to him was, I said, okay, the guy said to me, well, I watched them play against LMU, and he was terrific. And I was like, everybody's terrific against LMU. And I said, look at Michigan State, look at St. Mary's, look at, when they played, Alabama. And if you look at Bolton, if you split his schedule, like Gonzaga's 15 toughest games and 15 easiest, there's a clear difference. And that's the problem you have with high school. It's just the level of competition is just not there.
As somebody who saw Aaron Gordon live, I watched Aaron Gordon 2 years live. And we're talking about a guy who's the 5th overall pick, went on to Arizona, just won an NBA championship. I mean, look how long it's taken for him to find a niche, and he's still a high-end role player. But if you just watched him in high school, you'd be like, this guy's the next. I mean, he was hitting step-back threes, literally jumping over people and dunking on them. So, I mean, I think there's pedigree to it where, like, okay, the athletic traits are there. Like, if a guy is 6'8" in high school and jumping over people, like, okay, there's a good chance this kid grows another 2 inches. He's going to get stronger. But, like, it's so hard to evaluate now. The national circuit of high school competition, I think, is a little bit different because you're seeing top-tier guys play against, if you go to a Monteverdi, for example. But it's just really hard. I mean, I've seen some high-level dudes, and it's just like, they're playing against kids who are worried about algebra tests later.
Well,
and I'm like,
I brought up Deontas Montiunas, if you remember, played with the Rockets and a couple other teams. If you watched him when he was playing early in his career in like the lower levels, and like, I think it may have been, I don't know if he was in the Adriatic League yet.
I think he was in the Adriatic.
I know he finished in the Adriatic League, but my point was, you'd see Montiunas come up the floor, going between the legs, behind the back, make a spin move and shoot over. And in the NBA, he was considered like a traditional center.
Von Looney was the same way,
because he couldn't do that stuff. He couldn't do any of that stuff because his handle wasn't tight enough. He wasn't fast enough. He wasn't coordinated enough. He could do it in the low levels of the Adriatic League, but he couldn't do it as a member of the Houston Rockets.
Here's your foil. Patrick Baldwin was so highly touted out of high school.
Yeah, right.
I mean, so highly touted.
Yep.
And kind of like Bates, chose probably not the best college
No,
path
he
for him.
chose to play for his father.
Yeah, exactly. But at the college level, he did next to nothing.
Right.
Truly, like next to nothing.
He was dismal.
And it was bad. And he still got picked based almost solely off of his high school production and his high school touting.
And he was what, the 30 overall?
He was the last pick. He was the 30th pick. He was the
30th overall pick in
yeah.
the first round after looking like I could actually, I could hold my own against him in a one-on-one game.
Bates didn't really play a whole lot at Memphis, so we didn't really get to see.
And they also tried to play him at point guard at Memphis.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of other issues there. He has these off-the-court issues that keep him really from remaining with Memphis. He enters the portal. There's big change. He goes to Eastern Michigan, which isn't a highly touted program to say the least.
Right.
And he's productive there with the ball in his hands 100% of the time. After really probably not playing a whole lot of basketball over his offseason because he was dealing with court. I think comparatively, one guy went in the 40s and was a way higher touted recruit who left high school early to play college. And Baldwin got picked at 30 and he was highly touted and showed no real improvement. Now he's a throw-in the Chris Paul trade.
Right. After and only his second season. Yeah. High school is just, just too many variables, in AAU, it's not really structured. They don't play great team defense. Sometimes it just becomes your turn, my turn, your turn, my turn. And I'm not talking about within teammates. I'm talking about you can score, now I'll score.
I watched Keontae George and Carson Wallace play heads up in a high school game. I watched them play each other in high school when they were both going into their senior years, and that's totally what it was. It was like one of them would make a great play and the other one would come down and do something. And they're like, these guys can play, but you're like, Jesus, are you going to – like, Carson Wallace trying to play defense, but Keontae George, because Arterio Morris is on that team. Keontae George and Arterio Morris were just like, your turn, my turn, your turn. It's like, hey, you go rebound, you shoot three.
Yeah, that's one thing I failed to say about we were talking about George earlier. He's still not a good defender and probably never will be. But all right. So let's move on to the other Cleveland guys, Sam Merrill and Isaiah Mobley. As I said, I thought Mobley should have been the most valuable player in Summer League. Anybody have thoughts on them? Quickly, Merrill's always been a great shooter, shot the lights out again, set the Summer League record for most threes made in the Summer League with 25. Sam's unsigned, and Isaiah Mobley is only on a two-way. Again, two players I think the Cavs should put on their regular roster. Anyone have thoughts on these guys?
I've got a soft spot for Mobley as a West Coast. I mean, again, I've watched him a lot, and I just think that he's not the fluid athlete his brother is. He almost, in college, he looked a little bit, almost kind of like dumpy and kind of looked like he ran. He just didn't look great. I just think the guy's a good feel for the game, and I think he can do everything on a basketball court you want from a 6'10" guy. He's not great at it. He's not a knockdown shooter. He's not an elite athlete, but it's like, you need a guy to step out, hit a three, go 1 for 2, 1 for 3. He can do it. You need a guy to pull down 7, 8 rebounds. He'll do it. I think his passing, and going back to college, I think his passing is super underrated. I mean, this guy, when that USC team got up to number 5 in the nation and rattled off, they start off 9-0, or they had a great start to the season. He was averaging, I think, 6. He led the team in every statistical category, I think, except steals. And he was averaging 6 assists a game on a team with Drew Peterson and Boogie Ellis still. So I just think that he has a great feel for the game. And while he's not going to blow you away, he's like that chameleon kind of four that can give you a little bit of everything. So I've always been a Mobley guy, to be honest. I've just been a big fan. And maybe I'm a bit biased. But
the one thing I don't understand, and don't get me wrong, I love Dean Wade's game. But Dean Wade really is a shooter. And, he's like a stretch 4 more than he is a stretch 5. Only because of his defense. He's not a great rebounder, and he's definitely not a shot blocker. But you can't tell me at this point in their careers that Isaiah Mobley's not a better all-around player.
Oh, yeah.
And they have Dean Wade on it. I don't begrudge Dean Wade. I love Dean Wade. But I don't begrudge him his contract, but I'm like, why don't you have Isaiah Mobley on a regular contract? And what the hell, Sam Merrill, for his NBA career, 3 years and not a ton of playing time, but still he's gotten, I don't know how many games has Sam played in his career. He's played 41 games, regular season games, 38% 3-point shooter. And he also can make plays. He hasn't shown a ton of this, but at Utah State, he was kind of like a point. He was like a combination of Jordan Hawkins, but he also had this playmaking that Hawkins, never had. Actually, yeah, he was a lot like Jordan Hawkins.
I will say this: if Sam Merrill goes off to some other team and has a really like solid rotational piece, a la Max Strus for the Heat, they're going to look really stupid having handed that dude $64 million. if Merrill does end up somewhere and shoots the ball well, a little bit of extra playmaking, kind of gritty, like they're going to look really dumb because they had a guy who could do that and just let him walk and gave another dude $64 million.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to. Oh, go ahead, Kim.
Oh, one last thing with Mobley. I've learned this from my own coaching in like youth sports. I've learned this from NBA for years. If a good player has a brother, I'm going to bet on the brother. Because just year after year, even if they're not better than the other sibling, they're going to at least be 80% of what that player is. Right? I mean, you can see it with the Lopez twins. We're already kind of seeing it with the Thompson twins. I think, it's a big part of why I picked Chris Murray as high as I did in our mock draft. I just, why not bet on the brother? I think Isaiah Mobley, physically, pretty similar. Game-wise, pretty similar. It's nice to see him have a good summer league.
Yes. All right, Christian's got to run. Christian, it was great to see you. You're going to be having an article come out on the website later this week on kind of summing up a lot of the things we talked about today, right?
Ups and downs. Probably not every player we talked about.
No. Of course.
But yeah, super excited for it, and time flies.
Alrighty.
Thank you guys so much.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Christian, and we'll look forward to the article.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So other guys in the category who were pleasant surprises were Jalen Wilson of the Nets on a two-way, Armani Brooks of the Nets, who just signed a two-way, Charlie Brown of the Knicks, the LA Lakers undrafted duo of Colin Castleton and Demoy Hodge, both were signed to two ways right after the draft. They both look very good. Nice moves by the Lakers. Michael DeVoe, one of my favorite players in last year's draft. Obviously some question marks about DeVoe's game, but he shot the lights out. I think he shot something like 60% from three, had some big games. Orlando Robinson, who we interviewed last year, he was on the all summer league team, big center who can stretch the floor. Mike Miles Jr., TCU guard, who's on Dallas's team. Also Taze Moore plays for the Mavericks. They both had excellent summer leagues. Keon Ellis, a two-way player for Sacramento, looks like he might be ready to move into onto the regular roster. And lastly, Dominic Barlow, also on a two-way for San Antonio. He's a very young player, and he also an overtime elite player, and he is looking good as a big and was very productive in summer league. So our last category is going in the wrong direction, and the first guy on our list is JD Davidson. Now, I know, Cam, you liked what you saw from JD, and the problem I see is I looked at what JD did last year in summer league, and all of his numbers this year are worse. So I'm going to let you, just based on that, and he's right now on a two-way, just signed a new two-way with the Celtics. So yeah, his numbers went backwards this year, and overall definitely weren't impressive, but I'll let you talk about the positives.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big fan of JD. I really liked him coming out of high school. I liked him at Alabama. I think I took him pretty high in our mock last year. And a lot of, like in terms of his direction, in terms of his summer league stats, he definitely took a step back from last year. But he had a really great G League season, in my opinion. He was a 20-plus point per game scorer. He did so relatively efficiently, especially given his shooting isn't not great from the perimeter. But I just think defensively, he can do things that the average NBA point guard just is not capable of doing. He's a chase down block threat. He can defend up positions from, even though he's a relatively small guard, I guess he is about 6'3", 6'4", but so probably about average. He can go above and beyond on the defensive end in a way that a lot of guys just don't. He's a high motor guy. I really still love the way that he navigates pick and roll. You can kind of compare him a little bit to a guy like Anthony Black. I think he's a little bit different body type, a little bit different athletic profile and like style play. But I still think that there's an NBA level, probably a backup point guard somewhere in there. I'd like to see him get more NBA level minutes next year to kind of demonstrate some of that value. Because I just can't give up on this guy. I think it's more of a me thing than his level.
I mean, he's a great passer.
He's a really good passer.
And the problem is he's also
struggles with turnovers.
Yep. Yeah, and he's also a good foul shooter. But he, this year again, we're talking 5 games, but last year he shot the lights out. 3-point percentage, and this year he shot 47% last year. This year 27%.
Yep.
So I guess my question is now again. If Boston makes the room on the roster, they could upgrade this to a regular contract. Do you think he's in position to challenge Peyton
Pritchard?
Peyton Pritchard for the?
It's difficult. I think it kind of goes. It really comes down to taste for me. Pritchard is a way more developed offensive player.
Much better,
especially shooting. Yeah, his shooting is a difference maker when it comes to kind of like a spot starter, which is kind of how he was used.
Right.
But I think the Celtics team has been at its best when they're a defensive-oriented club.
Right.
Because they've got enough offense. Regardless of who's out there, they got enough offense. They struggle to score at times, but I think that's more of a scheme issue than a personnel issue. I think he could really contribute in making this team faster, which they've struggled with in the past couple of years, especially with guys like Horford playing major minutes, and especially with Brown and Tatum not really having a great backup. They play slow. And I think when you get into playoff basketball, you have to be able to speed up the game a little bit, especially as, for the most part, half-court offense comes a lot harder. I think he could really contribute in that way. Personally, a lot of people like Pritchard around the league. I think that's a nice little trade asset. I think it would be worth bringing Davison up, especially knowing that
Pritchard
you've got other options.
Asked to be traded when his minutes dwindled last year.
Yeah, I think, like somebody's looking for a point guard.
Right.
Would San Antonio throw you a couple of seconds for him? I wouldn't doubt it. I think that would be a good fit for them, especially since they have an immediate need at that position.
Yeah, they don't really they could play Cam Payne, and who else did they add recently?
Well, they kept Trey Jones.
Right, but they added another vet, I thought, that could play minutes.
I'd have to look at their depth chart. But,
yeah, I don't have.
To me, Davison has a higher ceiling than Pritchard already.
Oh yeah.
If he puts together the shot, you got a really nice backup point guard on your roster.
Okay. So one guy, to me, was very surprising to see him struggle. another guy you really liked last year, and I moved him up into first round range. I originally had him, rated like a middle second round pick, and moved him up into late first round pick, and he ended up being taken number 23 overall and playing 70 games for Memphis last year. But the problem David Roddy has, I didn't mention his name, but the problem he has is there is a huge log jam on this team of bigs and big wings. And so, somebody has to replace Dylan Brooks in that starting lineup. And, Marcus Smart will eventually be that guy. But right now, Marcus Smart has to start for Ja Morant. So somebody else is going to have to step up. My choice was David Roddy, but now after this summer league, he didn't really look very good. Shot 40% from the floor, 26% from deep. His rebounding was okay. His turnovers were high, didn't do much defensively. What do you think is going on with Roddy?
It's hard to say because again, like we're a little bit limited in terms of our inside access.
Right.
Sometimes with summer league guys, it's more of a just show up, right? We believe in you.
But
see,
I kind of eliminated with him because he's got a chance to start.
I know. Which that in some cases that happens. It's like this is the expectation. You're a second-year player. You need to do summer league. We don't really care what happens. Just go out there, do your thing. On the other hand, it also appeared as though his effort level wasn't there. It feels like an instant of a player not caring too much about summer league and his performance. And historically, when that happens to guys, they end up falling down the rotation. It's hard to tell between those two possibilities. Both are perfectly realistic. But like you said, Rich, there is an absolute glut of guys that are coming for that spot, right? They already have Zaire Williams in-house, and we've been waiting for years for him to kind of get his opportunity. Obviously, you got Jake LaRavia, same draft as Roddy.
Mm-hmm.
For most of summer league, he outshone him. He had the ball in his hands more. He was more productive. He shot the ball better. I think he had a better all-around summer league than Roddy did. And Gigi Jackson, I mean, this is a late second-round pick that, his stats weren't great across summer league, but he had some really good games where he could put it together and, maybe not this year, but down the road, he's coming for that spot as well.
Right.
Yeah, man, and not to mention you're competing with a veteran like Smart that's coming in on a new team. That guy is one of the biggest competitors in the league. He is not going to go to the bench in all likelihood when Morant returns, and he can totally play the small forward position. It's a sad look for Roddy because he was awesome in the G League.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of those guys that was really too good for the G League. He was dunking on everybody. He was getting out in transition. He was rebounding the ball. He was over 20 per game in the G League for the hustle. And that's why he spent so much time with the team. That's why he got real playoff minutes for them.
Right.
I want to chalk it up to they kind of know what they have with him and they didn't expect a whole lot. But if it is an effort thing with him, it's not looking good for his second contract possibilities. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. And you know what? He is a heavy guy, a guy that probably could trim down. So that's a sign of possibly a good indicator of a lack of focus, drive, self-discipline. Sometimes there's medical issues, but if there was medical issues, he wouldn't be a professional basketball player,
and he wouldn't be playing summer league.
Right. All right.
Yeah. Tough.
Okay, so we have four more players. I think Drew wants to talk about one, but I thought all four of these guys were disappointing. I mean, they had their moments. I'm talking about James Bouknight, Blake Wesley, Dalen Terry, and Joe Wieskamp. And Joe Wieskamp didn't. I don't know what Toronto's doing. They have like 3 guards on their roster. Wieskamp really is probably more of a small forward, but it looked like he was going to be a backup shooting guard. No, they cut him. And he didn't play terribly. He just didn't play great. He was one of their leading scorers, though, in Summer League. Let's say something about their Summer League team. But anyway, Joe Wieskamp is a free agent now. Of course, Bouknight, Wesley, and Terry are all under contract. So, Drew, I know you saw some of Bouknight. What do you make of his game?
Yeah, I think just disappointing. I mean, at this point, I believe Bouknight's going into his 3rd NBA season. Is it his 3rd? And it's like, yeah, there were flashes. His last game, he looked really good against the Pelicans. He scored almost 30. It was 44% from 3, 50% from the field. But like the big thing for me is like, look, the offensive inefficiency is really bad. I mean, he was 38%. I'm looking at it from the field for the entire Summer League, 23% from 3. And this is a guy that we thought like coming in was offensively, that was going to be his calling. He was going to be a guy you can bring off the bench at a minimum that can kind of give you some spark plug offense. I think the 2 things for me that really disappointed though, did not get to like the free throw line at all. I mean, I think it totally took 8 free throws. Now, he made 7 of those 8, but for a guard who is, again, a veteran player who should be experienced, should be able to get to his spots at will, you would assume, to only take 8 free throws. Dyson Daniels took 8 free throws in his first game, just as an example. And that's a guy who got to his spots and did what he did at will. And then playmaking basically doesn't exist with this dude. I mean, at this point, this was another situation where he had 5 assists across all of his Summer League appearances. So he had a negative assist to turnover ratio. He had 5 assists. He only had 2 assists once. The team didn't win a single game. I mean, obviously that's more of a team thing, but the comment I made when we first started the episode was Summer League, I think for me is most important, looking at guys who have kind of taken the next step and are ready to be NBA players and in some cases NBA stars, and guys who the ship might be sailing. And I think Bouknight's now really trending towards that bust. I mean, for his college pedigree, his draft pedigree, and to come in here and be this inefficient and this unimpactful in the entire box score. I mean, he rebounded well, but I mean, that's not what's going to get him onto an NBA roster. I just thought he was really disappointing. And like I said, I think the curtain might be closing sooner rather than later if he can't, and he's got to turn something around.
This is a case of a zebra can't change its stripes. Bouknight, what was amazing about him was his ability to score in many different ways and create his own shot from nothing. But he was also inefficient. And, this Amoni Bates, we could say the same, much of the same. Amoni Bates is already starting to change his stripes and playing the team game. Bouknight just can't adjust, and that shows in his assist numbers. This is a guy, once he got the ball at Connecticut, that was it. End of story. Shot going up. And yeah. And the problem is, takes too many difficult shots. And for his pro career, 65 games, 35% from the field, 32% from 3. He has an opportunity, to move up the depth chart this year. And Nick Smith is already breathing down his neck.
And not to mention a guy that has had some off the court issues in his relatively short NBA career.
Exactly. Yes. Right.
So not only is he not showing it to you on the court, but off the court, he's a liability to a team that already has enough liabilities off the court.
Exactly.
With the Charlotte Hornets.
Exactly. Gentlemen, I think we've gone too long to do our mailbag this week. So I don't think we're going to squeeze it in. I just want to thank you. We have a question from Gerald, a question from Ryan. We will hopefully not go so long the next time and get to your questions. They should stay though Ryan's question might not be relevant if a big trade is made, because he's basically asking us who do we think is going to be traded and who we don't think is going to be traded. So, but we gotta put it off. But anyway, I just wanted to say, if you want to send us a question, because we will be resuming the mailbag now that the things are slowing down, please email it to admin, that's ADMIN, at hoopsprospects.com. We also take questions via social media on Twitter at Hoops Prospects, on Instagram at The Hoops Prospects, and on Facebook at Hoops Pros. So as always, I want to thank all our listeners. I want to thank our special guest, Keith Pompey, for joining us. And if you ever miss an episode, you can always get caught up on hoopsprospects.com. We will be back in 2 weeks, because for the rest of the summer, we are going to be going every other week until I think the end of September. After September 21st, that's when fall begins, and that's when we're going to be kicking it back in every week.
Time of the year.
Yes, right. But in 2 weeks, we'll be back with a special guest, and we'll talk more NBA, and we'll talk more college hoops, and we'll talk some about the draft, and yeah, all kinds of good stuff. Gentlemen, any final thoughts?
It just feels nice to be wrapping up the bow on our draft season.
Yeah.
We're almost there.
Yeah, and look for Christian's article on this recap of the Summer League on the site, and also Cam, Jackson, and I'll be contributing a little bit to that article as well. But all three of us, it's a 3-person project on all the draft grades for all 30 teams, which won't be exactly like the show, because things are getting changed up here and there, and we've got to watch all of Summer League now, so we may change a few grades before we publish that. So look for that too.
And you got to be looking for the off-season grades. We're going to give each team an overall grade for their free agency.
Did I say draft grades?
Yeah.
Did I say draft grades?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I meant off-season grades.
I didn't know if that one was up yet.
No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah, so we are publishing both.
Yeah, we're consolidating and doing them both together. Right. Did you look? Wait, now I'm going to start. We got to get going, folks. All right, we'll see you soon.